To order, I would like to mention Charles Johnson will not be here, and his wife is very, very ill. He is discussing probably dropping off of the P&Z, so please keep him and his family in your prayers, if you will. We will discuss the approval of minutes at the next meeting. So moving right ahead, the first item on the agenda is ZC 1907, a public hearing to rezone property from RA agricultural to a PUD PUD. One thing for the audience to remember on this is a PUD is a zoning that is not a subdivision, it is a specific zoning for a specific property. Therefore, our job up here as a planning and zoning commission is not to make a final decision, but simply to make a recommendation to the city council, because the city council is the governing body that, and the only body that can make ordinances for the city of Fairhope. So we will simply, at the end of this, we'll have a motion to recommend approval or recommend denial to the city council.
Sir, the speaker, I think it's hard for some people to hear.
Okay, I'll try to yell into it. Is this a little bit better if I get closer? I'll do that. Yes, sir.
Good evening. My name is Mike Jeffries, planning technician for the city of Fairhope. We're in the planning and zoning department. And tonight, as you said, this is zoning change case 19.07 of Live Oak Estates, rezoning from RA to a PUD, so it's a residential agricultural, to a planned unit development. And as you had mentioned, just want to let everybody know that it's a zoning change case. There are certain aspects for a zoning change case compared with a subdivision review case. The subdivision aspects are reviewed from a broad spectrum for a planned unit development, which has the site plan attached to it, so we can kind of get the basic concept of what will be proposed into the future. But so none of the engineering has actually been done. The specifics on drainage calculations and those type of deals will be vetted thoroughly. If this was recommended favorably by the Planning Commission and approved by the City Council, they would then apply for a subdivision, which would come back through the Planning Commission for their approval and have the full vetting and staff review at that time. The applicant's requesting rezoning at approximately 38 acres from residential agriculture to a planned unit development. The property is located at the southwest corner of Bay Meadows Avenue and State Highway 181. The applicant's proposing 107 single-family dwelling units on approximately 33.62 acres, and the remainder of approximately 4.34 acres is reserved for a future commercial parcel, which will require a standalone site plan review. The requested density is 3.18 units per acre. Up on your screen on the left-hand side is an aerial of the zoning map, along with an aerial on the right-hand side. As you can see, on the left, the parcel is outlined in blue and is residential agriculture is that green. The area to the immediate west and north of the parcel is zoned R2. To the south is the previously approved Twin Beach Estates, which is also a planned unit development, and the areas across State Highway 181 is currently unzoned Baldwin County. And the current conditions of the subject parcel is vacant farmland. There is a house and two other structures located on the property. The rest is previous farmland. On your screen is the proposed site plan showing the 107 units with the commercial parcel on the northeast corner. The southeast corner is reserved for the retention or detention pond area. That area is going to be designed so that way it meets with Fairhope subdivision regulations in green space to where it can be used for active and or passive recreation. And again, that would be through the subdivision process. You notice there is a large extent of green space and buffering along Bay Meadows Avenue and along the perimeter of the subdivision, as well as a large green centrally located inside of the residential units. This is just a color rendering supplied by the applicant, showing again the lots and the typical lot sizes. According to the zoning ordinance in Article 2, Section C.1e, the following is the criteria that shall be reviewed and based off of. Number one is compliance with the comprehensive plan. The proposed PUD is a multi-use development where most of the property is going to be single-family dwelling units buffered from State Highway 181 by the future commercial parcel. And the subject parcel is categorized as residential in the comprehensive plan. Therefore, the requested zoning is consistent with the comprehensive plan guidance in terms for residential use. Next is compliance and standards and goals in the intent of this ordinance. The purpose of the PUD district is intended to encourage innovative development that meets the comprehensive plan goals and is tailored to unique constraints and conditions of a particular site, and allows flexibility in uses, designs, and building layouts as opposed to other zoning districts to better serve the community needs. And below is a screenshot of the dimension size for the different lots, proposing 52-foot wide lots and 75-foot wide lots, and the setbacks are listed there. They both have 20-foot front, 20-foot rear. On the smaller 52-foot lots, there is a 6-foot side setback, and on a 7.5-foot side setback for the larger 75-foot wide lots, both of them requiring a 20-foot street side setback with a 40% maximum lot coverage by the principal structure and a 30-foot height requirement. And again, the commercial parcel will be subject to its own standalone site plan review at the time of development. The character of the surrounding property, including any pending development activity. The proposed PUD is going to utilize lots that are 75 by 120, 75 feet by 130 feet, and 52 feet by 130 feet. The reduction of some of the lots to 120 foot on the 75-foot wide lots is to allow for extra buffering that is along the Bay Meadows Avenue, protecting some of the large oak trees, and for extra buffering on the west side, acting as a buffer between some of the larger R2 sized lots that are there. When we did a density compatibility analysis, as we're all been fairly familiar with the process of a density compatibility, we have taken and drawn a quarter-mile buffer using the map viewer to locate all the properties within that quarter-mile buffer, and took the actual and allowable densities, and we took and calculated the weighted actual and weighted allowable and averaged those out to get what the weighted average density of the surrounding area would be, and we came up with a 2.01. The requested density tonight is 3.18. Wanted to mention that the site plan, as I mentioned, has the green belt along the perimeter, which separates the subject parcel lots.
So you're saying basically it's 50% greater than what you're...
Yes, sir. On the compatibility analysis.
50% greater than the compatibility analysis.
Correct. And then what we're looking at the screen on the map, part of the difference between the major difference in numbers is that the R2 lots that are located to the west of the property are a little over 2-acre lots. So it kind of skews the numbers a little bit based on using the averages. If they were normal R2 size lots, such as the ones that are located on the northwest side of Bay Meadows Avenue that were included, then that weighted average would be a lot closer, would be a lot higher than that 2.01.
What's an R2 minimum lot size, though? Isn't it
Minimum
10,000?
10,500 is the minimum. And
6,700.
these are 6,700 is what's being requested. The R2 size, so the R2 lot size is approximately a third of an acre, a little over a quarter of an acre, where the R2 lots that have been compared in the density analysis are over 2 acres for this same size lot. So if you took those lots that are already there and re-subdivided those, you would have enough room to create an additional 8 lots out of those 2-acre lots that are there. So that's where the number.
Well, I mean, what we'll do is compatibility analysis when we're saying we're comparing what's proposed to what could be there. You know, I mean, that land's not even R2 out there. Most of that land's unzoned. So,
Correct.
You know, and if unzoned land comes in, it's R1. So why aren't we comparing it to R1?
Well, we can
You know,
compare.
if it's unzoned and we say it's got to come in, you look at the picture, this one right here, and the lots look like dwarfs compared to everything around it. Is my only
No,
I mean, to me, the compatibility shows what the compatibility shows. I don't think we need to go back and say if, and if.
No, we're not saying if and if, I'm
do
just
it.
stating if those other lots were of typical, or usually we use the compatibility when a typical subdivision comes in, such as R2,
Right.
those lots are going to be R2 sized lots.
Right, but
All
if
of
this
this
is a
property
zone-
was annexed in by Colony all at one time back in 1989, so the lots in the subdivisions were already there. Why it was designated R2, I do not know.
Right.
I don't have the answer to that question.
I understand.
They didn't choose to be R2, that's just what that area shows. If they were zoned R1, which they still meet that lot size, they're actually, still a lot larger than what an R1 would be, then that number would be different. But they had the choice.
Right, but I'm saying compatibility should be based on what's there, not what could be there. I mean, you could also say if their lots were 9,000 square feet, they'd be,
Well, you can play the what-if game all day long. I just wanted to make the commission aware that
But-
the R2 lots.
But it
are-
is a zoning, it is zone, I mean, it's a question of whether what's there or what's it zoned. Currently, it's zoned, as Mike said, it's
Currently-
zoned R2. So it's a question of whether you want to compare it to what the zoning actually is, or what is actually there.
Or the lot sizes.
Or what the
that are
lot, or what the
legal.
lot size is.
Right, you can look at the lot sizes that are there, and yes, they are enormous. That's why I said that, wanted to bring up the minimum lot size for R2 is the 10,500, to whereas these R2 lots are actually a lot larger. So the compatibility analysis, where we use that as a tool to analyze the surrounding property, with the properties are zoned are largely greater than what that zoning would be, makes it hard to use that compatibility analysis as a strong tool
Yeah.
of analysis.
Well, I agree with Lee. You don't want to assume that every single one of these people is going to subdivide their property to
Correct.
the minimum allowed by R2, and
No.
then it would be compatible.
And they would not have the possibility of dividing that, but that R2 designation is there, and that's what we're trying to compare it to R2 size, not the picture that is on the screen of how big those lots actually appear to be. So I said the buffering and separation that is around the perimeter of the lots is used as a mitigation measure between the dissimilar lot sizes. The site plan also shows 3 different points of access, 2 of which are from Bay Meadows Avenue, and 1 that uses a connection to Twin Beach Estates, which has the same density and similar lot sizes just to the south. So they would be connecting to that stub-out street that was required of Twin Beach Estates to put it when it was developed. Adequacy of the public infrastructure to support the proposed development. Fairhope Utilities water and power are readily available, and Fairhope Utilities sewer and gas can be made available during the subdivision process. And impacts on natural resources, including existing conditions and ongoing post-development conditions. The subject property is located on previously farmed land with no indication of wetlands being present. The image to your right indicates the topographic relief. The high point is approximately at 115 feet in the northwest corner, and the low point approximate elevation of 80 feet in the southeast corner. And their preliminary site plan shows that a retention or detention pond, it will be in that southeast corner of the property to capture and treat the stormwater runoff coming from the site. And there was an environmental study that was done on this to check for any possible wetlands or endangered or protected plant species and or animal species. And the results were that there was nothing located that was endangered on this piece of property. Compliance with other laws and regulations of the city. At the time of development, during the subdivision process, all applicable laws of the city will be applied. Same with compliance with other applicable laws and regulations of other jurisdictions. At the time of development, all the applicable laws will be applied. Impacts on adjacent property, including noise, traffic, visible intrusions, potential physical impacts, and property values. Staff does not anticipate any significant issues related to this criteria. And the last criteria is similar to criteria number 8, is impacts on the surrounding neighborhood, including noise, traffic, visible intrusions, potential physical impacts, and property values. Staff does not anticipate any significant issues relating to this criteria. A traffic study was conducted, and any recommended improvements at the time of the subdivision will be required by staff. Currently, the traffic study recommends that the intersection of Highway 181 and Bay Meadows Avenue be widened to accommodate a northbound left turn lane, and this lane will allow the future signal to operate with permitted, protected, concurrent left turn phasing for the northbound lane and southbound approaches. Currently, the subdivision Firethorn that is located on the east side of 181, they have a certain trigger that when it is hit, a traffic light is warranted by the Alabama DOT, and they took this into consideration when this traffic study was performed, knowing that a traffic light is coming to that intersection. That intersection has already been marked to be a major thoroughfare for traffic. So the traffic signal, with the addition of this turning lane going left, will allow for appropriate signals to allow traffic to safely turn left onto Bay Meadows, and then getting out of Bay Meadows to either turn right onto Highway 181 or to turn left onto Highway 181. Just a few comments. The proposed PUD utilizes buffers that are above the minimum required to retain more of the natural forested vegetation, therefore removing less trees. The large pond is to be used as an amenity, not just a basin to capture the storm water. In the area, the pond can be used for passive recreation and the pond itself for active recreation such as fishing or possible kayaking. The developer is proposing that the pond will meet the requirements of the subdivision regulations to allow for 30% of the area to be counted as green space. Currently, the green space percentage of the presented proposed plat is met without it. And if approved, the green space will likely be increased during the subdivision process. And to touch on that, the subdivision regulations with the newly amended green space is that if a pond meets a certain criteria of having a 3-to-1 side slope and the area around it can be used for recreational, such as maybe walking trails or picnics or gazebos, that type of deal, that pond can be counted up to 30% of it for their green space. And as I mentioned, that none of that area is calculated in their green space as of right now. There's a large green in the middle of the development that provides a centralized area for the mail kiosk and room for active and passive recreation. And again, I think that was taken from one of the ideas that was just implemented into the subdivision regulations, where the graphics from the zoning ordinance were put in there, the idea of a green for the neighborhood. And lastly, they're very similar lot sizes to Twin Beach Estates, would allow for a seamless transition between the two developments if it got approved and went through an approval for a subdivision. Staff's recommendation is approval for the following conditions for ZC 1907. One is that the commercial parcel uses are the same as the uses listed in Table 3.1 of the zoning ordinance for B4, which is the business and professional district. We handed you out copies with the B4 zoning area highlighted on it to look at the uses, possible uses that are there for discussion. And the accessory and dwelling setbacks were not included on the preliminary plat, but they would be the normal setbacks for most of our residential uses, which is behind the building line or the behind the principal structure, 5-foot side setbacks, 5-foot rear setbacks, a 10-foot separation between the principal structure and accessory dwelling unit, the same 30-foot maximum height, and the same 25% lot coverage of the required rear yard. The third condition is that the development on the commercial parcel as stated shall go through a standalone site plan review, therefore given another opportunity for staff and its representatives to review any development that would go on. And 4, just housekeeping, is they show 10-foot drainage easements currently, and that's to reflect a 12-foot drainage and utility easement instead of 10 feet. I'll be happy to answer any questions, and Mr. Joe Rector is here on behalf of the developer and can answer any questions I might possibly not be able to.
Yeah.
Questions for staff?
Yep.
Yes, sir.
I've got two, Mike. Under your Article 2.c, little e, the compliance with the comprehensive plan, first line states, "The requested zoning is a PUD which is intended to encourage innovative development that meets the comprehensive plan," et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yes, sir.
Tell me something. What's innovative about this?
Where the innovative part comes in is it allows for, instead of an R1 or an R2 district to come in to where all the lots are exactly the same size, it allows the density of the subdivision to be molded in a different way to where you can have larger lots, more on the outside border where the density is different on the inside. And the part of the PUD is the commercial aspect for this particular development, allowing the commercial development that's on Highway 181, which is compatible with some of the uses that are in the same area, some of the storage units and other office buildings that are just a few hundred feet away from this area. If they were going to zone it strictly residential, R1, come in as normal from an RA, and wanted to go R1 with the larger lot sizes, the possibilities of doing any type of commercial activity would be negated.
Well, I understand the commercial activity aspect of it, but there was a time moons ago where, for all practical purposes, planned unit developments were used to do nothing more than increase the number of lots. And they really didn't do anything but just jam them in with the explanation that, oh, this is a
That is a
very
PUD.
innovative way. And it almost seems like, with the way this is laid out, that's pretty much the way this one is.
Is it-
I totally concur. You know, the lots are, to me, this is just to put, just to say, you know, how thin can we slice these pieces of pie? I
Right.
don't see anything innovative, you know, the setbacks, when you put an air conditioned, you know, condensation on either side, you got about 6 inches to slide between the air conditioners to get to the backyard. I'm totally agreeing with Art on this.
Yeah.
You know, the lots are 67% of the required R2 zoning. If you look at the surrounding zoning, you got RA, R2, R1 unzoned. You know, I don't, but I'll listen to the presentation and listen to the audience, but to me, it just looks like, you know, how many lots can we get in here and how thin can we slice it? And to me, you know, if we're gonna put it that thin, I'd like to know how close is this to what we consider a village center, to where, you know, are we gonna have sidewalks with this kind of density getting to the Walmart? Are we gonna have sidewalks getting to, you know, some commercial uses? And is this close enough that people aren't driving long distances to get a gallon of milk and a pack of cigarettes?
Right.
Maybe it's close enough for that, but I totally agree with Art as far as the, you know, this looks to me.
Completely understand those concerns. I
you know,
think
it's
the
50%
developer was
greater
trying
than the
to,
compatibility.
Now, let me get-
replicate the,
Let me give you one more while we're on it.
yes, sir.
It's obvious that at some juncture, 181 is going to be widened substantially.
Yes, sir.
There've been discussions down even further south from here. One of the things I think we really need to be cognizant of, what is going to happen with our roadways at some point in the future. The issue has to do with the commercial area and your retention pond. And the day when they come to widen 181 and you eliminate a large portion of your retention pond, which is needed to collect whatever water is required by our ordinances, you're going to eliminate or lose a large percentage of it. So it gives me heartburn to see this backed up right up against the road, knowing what we can expect in the not-too-distant future.
Yes, sir. And the applicant did talk with AlDOT about their future expansion plans of Highway 181 and was provided drawings showing that either the property has already been purchased or has been set aside. That is, everything on the east side of 181 is the side that is going to be expanded. The right-of-way will be increased on that side of the road, and I'm sure the developer can speak a little more in detail about his discussions with them on that.
Have you seen that? Have you seen that response?
Yes, sir.
You've seen it from AlDOT?
Yes, sir.
Okay, no, you don't have to show me, just tell me that,
Yes,
tell me
sir,
that you've seen it. I believe you if you tell me.
Yes, sir. I've seen the
Okay,
drawings from
I-
AlDOT where it shows the proposed right-of-way is, and the letter is going to be acquired from the opposite side allowing the detention pond to go in this corner. Otherwise, if Aldott
Okay.
had interest in.
Well, you've
purchasing
answered
that
my
side.
question. And so the widening of 181 in this particular location is going to be on the east side of the highway?
Yes, sir, that is
Okay,
correct.
that's, you answered my question. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I have one other question. 'Cause
Yes,
the
ma'am.
Compatibility analysis, because of the diversity of lots around it, it makes
Mm-hmm.
it hard to compare specifics. And I was trying to figure out how this appears to be very, very similar to the density of the Twin Beach Estates PUD.
It's
to this-
exactly the same.
Okay, and when was that PUD established?
That PUD was just approved last,
Couple months ago.
let's say say it was, the final was just a few
March or-
months ago. It
I
I
was-
believe
March.
we had final plat approval for March on.
Right,
Okay, I
but,
thought-
but those are
And-
supposed to be transitioned, and with Twin Beach Estates, we said into Twin Beach, may be a commercial node, so we allowed that density. Does that mean we're gonna allow that density to go all the way to Daphne?
No, I mean, I have the same concerns about, density is good when it's walkable, when it's close to existing surfaces. I'm just trying to, then across the street, is that Firethorn?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
So what is, it's hard, I'm, looking at 3 different maps, trying to compare, and it's hard to, when you're driving through, it's hard to ascertain that as well. How do these lots compare to Firethorn lots?
A lot smaller.
I say the lots in Firethorn are slightly larger lots. I can't recall the exact number. Apologize for not being able to recall the exact size of the Firethorn lots off
Yeah,
the
but
top of my head.
that helps.
I know that some of the Firethorn lots, they have different lot sizes that were in their PUD as well, but I can't stand here and tell you exactly what those lot sizes are. And on the commercial node at Twin Beach, where the comprehensive plan says that that is a commercial node for just the major 4 corners of that, and is not to expand out and to try to cause a a strip commercial joint to go on. Having the commercial node in this PUD off of 181, which is a frequently used corridor, it helps buffer the residential use behind it, but prevents a commercial strip, which is frowned upon and in the comprehensive plan with the location of where that pond is, and then the commercial quarter being contained by itself with the residential behind it and the water feature and the retention pond to the
Are
south
there any
of it.
restrictions on the commercial node, on the commercial portion?
For the PUD?
Yes.
Yes, sir, allowable, well, it'll go through, like I said, its own site plan review, and
As far as,
B4.
metal-clad buildings.
the uses will be of B4, the B4 zoning, and then the same zoning ordinance as far as whether if it's a no bare metal facade can be seen from any of the right-of-ways. If it was a metal building, it would have to have a brick facade, a stucco facade,
But they've
something.
done nothing in excess of of our regular B4 ordinances as far as buffering, landscape, or anything like that.
They haven't added anything additional. They would still, when the time of development of that commercial parcel would have to comply with all of our zoning regulations such as the landscape ordinance. And they provided a 30-foot landscape buffer between that commercial node and the proposed residential units to keep separation from those two uses.
I have a question. Did we or did we not approve Twin Beach Estates as a gated community? I know that.
No, ma'am.
It was not approved as a gated community, no ma'am.
I just wanted to.
No, ma'am. Those, and forgive me for interjecting, but the various infrastructure in Twin Beach Estates went through the same process, and those roads and streets and infrastructure was dedicated to the city.
So if you have any other questions for me, let me know, or if you have any questions.
Yeah, we'll
for
go
Mr.
ahead and
Rector.
let the developer present at this time. Thank you, sir.
Yes, my name is Joe Rector. I'm with Mullins LLC. We represent Breland Homes, and this is a development that they're proposing here. And one of the things I wanted to, just slide you back and forth. Okay. It's going to be the other way here. I think this one maybe shows you a little bit better, but I realize what you were saying whenever you were looking at it, trying to compare it to everything around it. Most of the maps don't really give you a really good picture, because whenever you, we had an aerial that was zoomed out much greater, and you can see the things that are actually being constructed there. The development that's on the south side of Twin Beach, the Twin Beach PUD that was just previously approved, and some of these other, at Firethorn and these as they're starting to be built in, you can see that this really doesn't look extremely out of place. It does on the map whenever you have this plotted up here where it's just parcels that are colored in, but if you, this is exactly the same lot size, density, and everything that was with Twin Beach that's adjacent to it. So, I mean, we worked with staff, you know, pretty intensely over the last several months trying to fine tune this to where we got it to where it was consistent with the adjacent development. And pardon? Oh, I thought you were speaking to me. And then also, as you mentioned, there is a corridor of the oak trees along Bay Meadows at the front and along the perimeter, and then in the middle too, the choice of that location there for a central park to kind of give you that, again, what the Fairhope's requirements are of having the centralized green space that's a actual usable green space, but not just something that somebody's carved out in the back of a piece of property somewhere where nobody's got access to it, but something that is, usable by the neighborhood, and then the area out front as well with the pond all be put out the front. It's similar to what you have down on 181 if you drive from here to I-10. You have several locations where you see they have the stormwater facilities to where they have, it's made it an amenity. And it's part of where they have, you drive out there and you see kids fishing in them, and all kinds of, the ducks, and it makes it people walking around them and jogging around. And that's what this thought is here as well, to be used as, to make it an amenity, something that's nice whenever you drive by that you're seeing, a recreational type green space, open space there, and not just a, just a dry hole that's there that's got water in it a few times out whenever it's raining. But and then to address your question, we did, and it's, I don't know if you have this, but we did a quite thorough narrative that was attached with this that's got several other exhibits in it that have the correspondence from DOT that show those future plans, that show where those, at this point in time, where those rights-of-ways would be. And the information they provided us was, as Mike mentioned, that their plan in this particular area was everything to go to the east side. So we took that into account so that we wouldn't be adversely impacted with the stormwater pond or anything like that if the road were to continue on down through here. So we had that taken into account as well. But if there's any other particular questions, I would be glad to answer or elaborate on anything, to try to clarify.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Joe, tell me what the commercial aspect, how is it going to benefit the residents? What is your design for the commercial aspect?
So we don't have a use for that at this point in time. One of the thought that was put on this for this planning stage was as if it were private mini storages. So you have similar to, like, it's kind of across the street and just to the south there's like private mini storages there. It'd be a similar concept available there, or other uses like you said, mentioned that were in the B4. It was just one of them that we sketched on here that would fit on that parcel. But we are home builders right now, so we don't have a use defined for that as it stands today. It is, it's an out parcel for that, and that's why, we said, that would be a carve-out that when the site plan was determined, that it would be a standalone site plan process and have to be able to stand alone on its own.
All right, I'll go ahead and open up the public hearing at this time and then call you back with
Okay.
whatever questions the public has.
Mr. Chairman, may I interject very, very briefly before we have the public hearing? And Commissioners, these are fantastic questions, which is great that we're having this opportunity. PUDs, and I'm putting on my Wayne Dice hat here, Commissioners, if you'll indulge me. PUDs are tricky. This commission certainly has the authority to set requirements via condition of approval. But what I'd remind the commission is that a lot of these same questions we went through when we were evaluating Twin Beach Estates. And so the first hearing of that, the first hearing of Twin Beach Estates was tabled and gave the developer and the engineers the opportunity to reevaluate and answer some of the commission's questions. And so a lot of those same questions are being asked today, so I wanted to remind the commission that we went through a couple iterations on Twin Beach Estates till we got it to the point that it was acceptable. And so that may be the case here, and just wanted to reiterate that for the commission's information.
And can I add to just the discussion about compatibility analysis? That is something that we have only used in the last couple of years. And the issue that I think you're seeing is that when you're in unzoned area, it's a analysis that is more geared towards somewhere that has a defined pattern. The problem is in the unzoned part of Baldwin County, you don't have those same design patterns. And so what we were using prior to this was using the comprehensive plan as our guiding document to address future planning in that area, not compatibility. So that's a relatively new tool that's been used. So just keep that in, when they refer to Twin Beach, I think that was probably one of the first sites that we used that on.
Where's that?
Buford or Mike, been a lot of reference to Twin Beach Estate. Do you recall the acreage of that and how many lots were allowed?
And Commissioners, I can tell you exactly that its density was 3.18 units per acre. Its actual density was 3.18 units per acre. I'm struggling to remember the exact number of lots and acreage, but it calculated to 3.18. And it had a combination of 55, either 52 to 55 foot wide lots. It had some 75 foot wide lots. It also had some 100 foot wide lots and some greater than 100 foot wide lots right along Twin Beach Road.
Right.
But if we do hear this case again, we're at the staff level, we're happy to give additional information about surrounding developments. But Twin Beach Estates is around 22 acres. So if you work backwards from, you can get the lot count out of 3.18 units per acre. It was 72. Thank you, Emily.
And how many acres is Twin Beach?
10?
No, I think it was 22 to 25.
In the density, does that take into account the commercial being in there as well?
Now, that did not include, correct, that was strictly residential.
So we
And,
took
Mike,
the
can you clarify
commercial, we took the commercial acreage out when
The-
we did that?
The density for Live Oak Estates, what we're talking about now, that parcel that is reserved for commercial, that acreage was taken out of, that 3.18 does not include that separate parcel. All the information that we looked at for calculating the net density for the green space calculations and the density level as far as just units per acre was taken strictly from, I think, the 33.62 acres that is actually being used for the residential use. So that was one of the things we looked at first, was couldn't take into consideration the entire parcel for the unit count so we had to remove the commercial aspect to get an actual adequate number for the units per acre.
Okay, thank you. Anything else, staff? Commissioners? All right, if not, at this time, I'll go ahead and open the public hearing. When you come up, if you will please state your name and your address for the record. Please try to keep your comments to 3 minutes or less, and if somebody has said what you've already said, I'm going to take notes and call the developer back up, ask whatever questions come up, and then let the developer have a chance to answer those questions, and as commissioners will discuss and make a recommendation. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Commissioners. I'll try to make it very brief. I see you have a long agenda tonight. I try to have a few things prepared. My name is Mark Reshetko. I'm an adjacent landowner on Derby Lane, 9727 Derby Lane. And I appreciate the comments that I've heard tonight. It's very encouraging. I'm old school, so a lot of that stuff I do by paper and pen. My kids ask me all the time, when's the last time I seen a dinosaur? So, anyway, it's a brief history of the Bay Meadow subdivision. It was originally at the polo field here in Fairhope. I moved out to Bay Meadows in 1989. A previous lawsuit settlement with the state of Alabama on the right-of-way on 98 out here. The governor of the state of Alabama signed the deed over to me, so I've been out there a long time. The city came by one day and asked us if they wanted us to come into the city. They needed to use part of our property to connect to Quail Creek to get water out there. So we said yes, and then they brought us into the zoning. I have 2.99 acres, which is just shy of the RA recommendation. It was brought in as R2 as part of the entire parcel. So the entire parcel, rather than individual lots, were brought in as R2. We did not get lights or sidewalks. We didn't ask for any of that. We like the country aspect of it. We like the estate feel of the neighborhood. As things have progressed, the city has progressed on top of us. So we formed a neighborhood organization called the Colony Conservation Trust. And this was to prevent exactly what's occurring tonight. We like it precisely like it is. We like to preserve our quality of life. Our value in the property is not in the dollars and cents. We have raised families out there, and we are neighbors. My neighbors' dogs come over and eat out of my dog's dish, and, they use my lawn. And I don't have a problem with that because we've been doing this a long time, But this isn't, the value of the property is in raising the quality of my family life. And that's where we're at. We do not like the high density of this group housing. We got it turned down in 1999 when they first proposed it. Mr. Turner, you were on the commission at that time, I think. There's been a history of opposition to this type of development on this property. I don't think the owners are listening to us. I think the commission is, owners aren't. I went door to door on Thursday. I just learned about this on Thursday. I went door to door and knocked on everyone's doors, had a beer or Coke with everybody. Nobody is in favor of this. Matter of fact, quite a few of my neighbors showed up tonight. If they'd stand up and say they were in opposition, I'd appreciate that. You just stand up, you're here.
God, never let that happen.
So there's quite a history of opposition to this type of development. I'm sure they have something else to say. I'm gonna finish here and let them go on. But anyways, there's problems with the development. I haven't been able to completely look at every aspect of it, but we see problems with the trees, we see problems with fencing, we see problems with parking, we see 107 cheap houses going up rather than what actually is proposed for this area is 13 houses for the 38 acres. We have no problems with the way it's zoned. We don't like this particular plan.
Where do you come up with 13 for?
Because it's zoned RA and it's 38 acres and you just kind of do the math on that. So,
Got it.
So we certainly have problems with the 30-foot right-of-way on it, which is a problem that we'll address with the staff. And I've addressed it, and there's still a concern about the 30-foot right-of-way. So anyways, we think this PUD is a dud. So if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them, or if you want to talk, listen to somebody else. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, sir.
know the policy. I've never done this before.
Just state your
You
name and
just
your
walk up,
address.
Elliot
and-
Sylvester, 9849 Bay Meadows Avenue. Staunchly opposed to this idea. I'm one of the new guys on the block, just purchased a home a little over a year ago. We moved there, we have small children, we have a very big family, including grandchildren now. And if you see kids riding on Bay Meadows on bicycles, those are my kids. And if you're going to dump that many cars onto our street, which we already know who's neighbors and who's not, because we have 2 speed humps, and the people that use them as ramps are not neighbors. They're the ones that are flying through from 181, getting over to Thompson Hall. We chose that area because it's quiet, because it's beautiful, and I know that the developers, I don't want to take away from people making money and building houses and so forth, but the whole idea was across the street, I knew that the woods were eventually going to go away. I knew that the deer were going to go away, but I was hoping that it would be nice, big parcels, beautiful homes, friendly neighbors like we have right now. I got this notice in the mail Saturday for this meeting tonight. So I don't know how this all works, but it just seems like this is kind of getting pushed. And as one of the homeowners with a large family, I would say, please, please don't let this go through. That is a lot of cars that are going to be, I'm afraid, racing down Bay Meadows. The Twin Beach, the difference is there, all those cars are going out on Twin Beach where the speed limit's 45. And you've also got the breakup because you get the 4-way stop at 13. Bay Meadows, I mean, already, you can all, like I said, you can tell when it's not a neighbor. And if you're going to have that many houses and you know you're going to have 2 cars per house, that's a lot of traffic. That's a lot of traffic on our street. So I don't know what power we have as neighbors, but very much not liking this at all, very opposed to this. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else wish to speak to this item? Yes, ma'am.
Hi, I'm Martha Monkham. I'm at 9571 Bay Meadows Avenue. Sorry.
You can pull it down a little bit.
Pull it down.
There we go. Thank you.
Okay. I didn't get a letter. I got a letter from my neighbor who said, look, which I think all of us out there should have gotten a letter. We're 2 blocks long. I wrote a letter. You should all have it. Sorry.
I think we probably have an idea of what you're thinking. Thank you. Anybody else wish to speak to this item?
I'll try not to cry.
Okay, pull it down if you will, and if you'll state
All
your
right.
name and your address.
All right, I'm Gloria Monkton. I am deeply affected by this. I read this letter and it said that Polly requested the rezoning of this property. When did Miss Polly request the rezoning of this property? That's what I want to know.
That's how it's listed in the tax records
When?
today.
Miss Polly died in January the 28th, I think. And the last thing Miss Polly wanted was for this to happen to her property. She was lying in bed ill the last time I talked to her. And she said, I'm going to whirl in my grave if they do this to my property. And it's done. Here's the letter that Martha wrote.
We've got a copy of the letter, ma'am.
Have you read it?
Yes, ma'am.
Our hearts are broken. People are saying we're going to move. There won't be a neighborhood. What are you doing to Fairhope?
Well, say, what am I doing to Fairhope? I'm not the presenter of this.
Somebody's got to stop it. The mayor ran on maintaining Fairhope as a community, and she's done one crappy job of it. Every time you turn around, something else is going wrong. Our sewer system is inadequate. many properties are going just rotten, this whole neighborhood. This is not right. This was a small community, and it has become a pass-through for whomever. This is not right. You are destroying Fairhope by allowing all of this building with, like the gentleman said, small houses, and not thinking of the families that have established themselves here.
Right.
9571 Bay Meadow. We have children, we have people with autism, my grandson. We have people with Alzheimer's that are out walking in those streets. What's going to happen when you have all these cars?
I understand, but don't attack us because we have a presentation that was presented to us. We have to look at presentations that are presented to us, and that's what we're doing. Is you're saying that we're destroying Fairhope. We're simply giving somebody their God-given or United States-given
There is
rights
the right.
to make a presentation. We haven't made any recommendation one way or the other. So to say we're destroying Fairhope because we're looking at somebody's presentation is not fair.
Well,
If you
that's
want to bring
true.
some other developments that we've approved that you are upset about, you can certainly do that and say that we're destroying Fairhope. But by listening to a presentation somebody makes on a zoning, we're simply giving them their rights that they have as a United States and a citizen here in the state of Alabama to make a presentation to do what they wish with their property. And at that point, we can make a recommendation to the city council one way or the other, who will then decide whether or not to accept our recommendation.
I would appreciate it if you make one change in this. If the entrance to this was onto 181 instead of Bay Meadows,
Okay?
that would relieve a lot of this discomfort for this community.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, thank you. Would anybody else wish to speak to this item?
My
Yes, sir.
name is Douglas Wright. I live at 9763 Bay Meadows Avenue. This plan cannot work. Bay Meadows Avenue, like they've said, is a quiet, small two-lane street. If 6 cars go down that road in a day, that's busy. It's that simple. It's quiet. The trees form a perfect tunnel. Photographers for national magazines take pictures there. You cannot put in this development without losing at least a partial of those trees. It's just the traffic alone. People run up and down that street. Like they said, children play on that street. It's a dead end to Thompson Hall on one end. Traffic will be backed up tremendously with 2 entrances to Bay Meadows Avenue on this lot. One of them's right in front of my house. I think it's a bad idea. I'm all for development, but as the lady said, we're destroying the very thing that makes Fairhope appealing. And I'm against it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Anybody else wish to speak to this item?
I'm Joy Willard. I'm at 19316 State Highway 181. I'm right across the street from all of this. And I'm not against development, but I've been out there since it was a dirt road. It was called Bell Forest Road. It only went down to Cowpen Creek. That was the end of it. So I've raised my family out there, and I'm not against progress. It's just, this is just going to be so congested, just really more than progress. So that's all I have against it. It's just so, it's so much, and it was such a bit. Well, it is a beautiful area, and it was just like Fairhope's been my whole life. I've been here my whole life. So anyway, that's what I had to say.
Thank you, ma'am.
But I am against it.
My name is Julie Comer. I live at 9551 Bay Meadows. I just wanted to remind the council that I believe it was 3 years ago that the street did get 2 speed bumps because of all the high traffic, because of people cutting through off 181 and speeding down that road. I am opposed to the street cutting through to Bay Meadows as well as the commercial property that's being proposed. I don't want to see those kinds of things, the commercial property in our neighborhood. Just using my walk-around sense, it seems like when subdivisions are built like this in this area, that all of the roads lead to a major highway, so cutting out into 181 seems to make more sense. I would like some help. Is it Mike? So on your point number 8, if you wouldn't mind, on your slide, I would just like some help understanding from the city's proposal on that point that there wouldn't be number 8, yes, the impact of traffic and visibility, yet there is a proposal to put a stop light right at Bay Meadows and 181. So there is an anticipation of an increase in traffic.
To answer that question immediately, the traffic light is due to a trigger from the subdivision across the street, Firethorn. When it was developed, the traffic study indicated that when it reached a certain capacity of development, that a traffic light was going to go there. So regardless of if this gets denied and never heard of again, a traffic light will still be at the intersection of 181 and Bay Meadows. It's just a matter of time for the Firethorn development to reach a certain capacity.
Okay.
With
Thank
the traffic study, what it advised for this development was to go ahead and proactively widen 181 to allow for a left-hand turn lane going north onto Bay Meadows to facilitate when the traffic light was installed, to make sure that the safety for crossing all four directions was taken into consideration.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
But I do just want to reiterate my point, and that everyone here is making, is that it is a very quiet street currently, and the increase of traffic is something that we definitely are all very concerned about, and would like to see that not happen.
Thank you very much. All right, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing at this time and turn the meeting over to the commissioners. Commissioners, any questions for staff or for the developer who's here? We didn't have any questions from the audience, just concerns and comments.
Mr. Chairman, if I can interject very, very briefly, just to reiterate, and I know we may have some visitors tonight that have not been through this process before, and we as staff and as commission may take it for granted, but understand that invariably we get asked about advertisement and public notice, and understand there are state laws governing that process and what information goes out and to whom, and that it goes to, and it's based upon tax records. So we certainly understand the frustration of not receiving a letter or receiving a letter at a certain time, but understand that that is governed by state law, and staff follows those procedures for conducting public notice and advertisement. That's why, in addition to that, signage is placed on the right-of-way near developments.
Correct.
Which I picked up twice. Stood back up twice.
Mike, I was wondering about the proposed 40% coverage of the primary building. And is that number typical for R2? Or it seems like by the time you get 40% of a building on a small lot and you get a driveway and you already have the road and the sidewalk out front, it seems like there's going to be a pretty significant drainage impact to that.
Is it, that 40% of the principal coverage is pretty typical for the different size lots. That is the the planning commission desires to lower that number. It is within your means, but that number is not astronomically.
Is this based on an R2 zone or an R?
So in R2, the lot coverage is 37%.
Right. That's around the same. And that is something, if the commission desired, that could be lowered to match that of an R2 or whatever commission decided.
I gotta say, there's not a lot about this I like. I mean, to be honest, for a PUD. I mean, if this was an R2 or, well, let's be fair here. I mean, to the developer, I mean, if this is R2 and it hit the R2 requirements, I mean, I'd vote for it if it met it. But to me, I go back to what Art said to start with. The PUD is something special, not an excuse to get 6,700 square foot lots.
Yes, sir.
And my point, if they came in and said, hey, here's what we're doing with the commercial, not just, let's get 6,700 square foot lots and throw some mini storages out there, boy, that's going to be attractive on 181, isn't it? The cars are going to be parked out in the driveway, the cars are going to be parked across the sidewalks because the lots are so small, people can't get into the backyards. It's just, I'd rather see, and God, I hope lightning doesn't strike me and the mayor doesn't shoot me, I'd rather see an apartment complex with
Right.
63 units in the middle and the rest green space around there,
Yes, sir.
than cars parked over the sidewalks and what this is going to be. The only piece of property anywhere around here that's got even close to this density is the Twin Beach that we approved, and we approved that based on a transitional density that, number one, it opens up on Twin Beach Road, not Bay Meadows, which is currently a road that doesn't have sidewalks. You consider it two-lane, but I drive through there sometimes. It is beautiful, and I barely consider it two-lane. I mean, when a car
Right.
comes, you kind of slow down a little bit because, it's just a little meandering, used to be dirt road back there, and those lots were all, they were never zoned, but they were all made at 2 to 3 acre lots. And we had a lawsuit one time because somebody came in to divide one of those 3 acre lots in that general neighborhood, and we denied it based on the comprehensive plan and found out that since it met the subdivision regs, we had to approve it. Emily will remember that. But to me, I just.
I agree. I
if
don't
the
disagree
commercial
with anything.
component says, hey, here's what we're going to do to make this special and make this commercial where it's an asset to everybody in this development as well as everybody in Bay Meadows. And here we're going to have a certain amount of density, but we're also going to, this is what this is going to give to Fairhope. But, the compatibility shows it is 50% over. And then if you look at a map, I mean, even Firethorn, the lots are, 50 to, 60% greater. And I just don't see a lot of redeeming value in it where I can, with a good conscience, give a recommendation as it's currently drawn, for the city to, approve it as drawn. I'd like to
Yes, sir.
see, I'd like to see more of a transition in the density, and I'd like to see some caveats on the commercial that, hey, here's what we're going to do to have this be attractive from Highway 181. And that's just my personal feelings.
Well, I would make one comment, when you said if it was strictly zoned R2, that would equate to not counting, not removing right-of-way or, a retention detention would be 157 units per acre if it was strictly R2 across the board. Like I said, you'd have to remove the right-of-way and the retention area from that equation. But if it was strictly R2, you took the commercial out, you threw the PUD out the window, then the R2 zoning that density level would still be somewhere in that same ballpark, I would
I guess
imagine.
It's not zoned R2.
Well, no, you had mentioned
It's
you'd rather
zoned
see it
RA.
zoned R2.
Yeah.
No,
So that's why I'm saying
I
that the
think it's going
same
the right
density.
direction. I'd rather see an
Right.
R1, frankly,
Yeah.
or a PUD that has, excuse me, I'm
Yes, sir.
talking too much. Go ahead, let's hear what other commissioners have to say.
Well, I'm going to try not to restate what you said. I guess part of the concern is at some point, at a certain lot size, I'm not opposed to density on the whole. I like to see dense developments next to services, not just self-storage, but walkable services. I don't see the walkability. And then at some point, if you're still trying to do detached single-family residences, the density, the quality of the community is, isn't served by the density. It makes more sense for them to be attached or duplexes or something other than the tiny bit of land that's remaining, like with all the concerns you said about parking, stormwater, and just aesthetics.
Right.
So I have those same concerns in addition to the traffic onto Bay Meadows. Even if you had some pockets of smaller lots, and then some larger lots, a little more diversity so it doesn't just feel like you squeezed as much as possible and there was really nothing left over. It doesn't feel like it would age well.
I've always been of the opinion that PUDs, planned unit developments, the best thing you could do with them is cluster your development to where you did something unique. You really had something unique. It was a way that you could have smaller lots, you could have some people in here, but it made the development unique, as it's stated in our regs. That's the purpose of a PUD. This is not that, to me. And although we're going to make a recommendation, I mean, we don't get to approve or disapprove this. All we do is make a recommendation to the city council. And so, and that's what we're going to do. But I personally would rather see it redesigned to the point that it doesn't just look like it is jammed to the hilt, and using the term PUD to allow that to happen.
Just one quick on a positive note, I mean, the things I'd like to see more of that I think are moving in a good direction is retaining the open space around those significant oaks in the middle, retaining the oaks along the street. I'm not sure if that's enough to retain the oaks along the street, and the usable pond. So if those attributes could be built upon, then, maybe.
I totally agree
These
with
are more
that.
questions diverted, or comments.
Sorry,
If
yeah.
Mr. Rector if you wanted to make any comments reverted back to that,
I totally agree with Rebecca's comments.
And Mr. Chairman, if I could say something that regardless of where this ends up going, one of the issues we've heard is a lot of concern about the direct access to Bay Meadow Road. That somewhat is already predetermined outside our control. AlDOT at some point in time said that the intersection of what is the entrance of Bay Meadow and Firethorn would be the next signalized intersection, and that's already been committed to. It was paid for at the expense of Firethorn, and will be triggered when a certain number of houses are CO'd in that development. They would not issue this property a direct access to 181 to service a large neighborhood, because they're going to direct it toward the signalized intersection from a safety standpoint. So understand, regardless of where this property goes in the future, if it has any level of development, that development is going to access. And understand, even if Bay Meadow is a substandard road, which it very well may be, it serves as a residential collector, meaning it runs from an arterial to another collector. And it makes sense in the hierarchy of roads that a residential access street connects to a residential collector that then goes to the arterials and things of that nature. So just keep that in mind. That is somewhat dictated by our state DOT, and it's part of their plan. And because they will only allow signalized intersections to be so close to each other. So this is a half-mile point from Twin Beach, which is a signalized intersection. So that's kind of set in stone. And it is a byproduct of just the growth in the area. So understand, I know that no one wants more traffic on their street, but that may not be an option to any future landowner here.
No, I totally agree. My comment was more about the density and the additional units on there. I know that at the end of the day, you've got to go on to Bay Meadows, period. And the people in the audience need to understand, as far as, at some point, something will be going here. I mean, it may not be this, but it's, not going to be that pretty pasture forever, and, that we would all love it to be. Unless it's our property, then we want to develop it. As I've said, the one thing I've learned in 18 years is we are all hypocrites, me number one. We don't want anybody else to develop their property around us, but by gosh, when I go to get my building permit, don't stop me, But anyway, I digress. Any other comments from the left side of the audience here? Well, one man with the only person with the vote is sitting at the far left.
I agree with all the comments that have been made. I don't find anything intriguing about it. I think it's like Art's made the point about just trying to get as many lots on the parcel as possible, under the PUD disguise. And I understand Richard's point about the 181 entrance. That totally makes sense. So there again, that all those houses are going to be dumping on Bay Meadows.
Well, one thing with our connectivity is when that is connected through, people from Bay Meadows can cut across the Twin Beach Road at times if they, are heading over to the soccer fields or something like that. I mean, there's some advantage to connectivity. Ken, if we make a recommendation, then that goes to the city council, and the city council makes a vote, may or may not accept our recommendation.
May I say a couple more things though to
Yeah,
address
but
some
with
of
that
these?
said, if the city council, if we were to make a recommendation, say for instance to deny, and the city council accepted the recommendation and denied, with the, what is the time frame now? Didn't we make some changes on how long someone has to wait to reapply?
365 days.
It is a year on a zoning still.
What'd you say, Ken? I can't hear you.
365 days.
Unless,
There's a major
unless
modification.
there's a major modification that addresses the comments of the
Yes.
commission.
That's right.
Yes. They can resubmit.
They can, yes.
Resubmit, but address the commission's issues with the application. And Chairman, and for Mr. Rector's information, now, we've had the public hearing, and that's closed. But Chairman, you may want to advise Mr. Rector that he may wish to ask the commission to table it if he wishes before we get ready for a vote. So that may be in order to advise him that he can make that recommendation.
Does it, Ken, does it have to go, if we make a recommendation to city council, does it have to go to the city council, or can the applicant pull it before it goes to city council?
Yeah.
Yes.
You act on it, it shall be submitted to the city council.
If we act on it, it has to be submitted to the city.
On the 365 days, I think it's 365 days. I don't think they can come back and change it. We did change the regulations to allow that.
For subdivisions,
Yes, this
for
is-
subdivisions.
that's
This
right.
is a zoning change.
Yeah, I was thinking it was a subdivision. Now, with that said, so if we make a recommendation, regardless of to accept or not, could they withdraw it and make some changes and come back if they change their mind at that point? Or once we make a recommendation, is it then absolutely
No,
have to
no,
go?
they can go to the city council, having heard what you said, and maybe get some additional feedback from the staff, and make revisions to it, and then it be considered by the city council.
Okay. Which that's always been an issue to me, that, we make a recommendation, that if changes are made, it's like, what does our recommendation matter? Because changes were made and our recommendation was on something else. I wish, it would come back again, so our recommendation would actually mean something in those
You
cases.
can recommend with specific revisions if you're in a position to do that tonight.
Yeah. I'm sorry, yes, sir.
No, that's what Buford said was exactly what I was about to ask. I mean, what I would ask is if there are some specific items that we have that we can address, that we could, if the board's opinion today is that it doesn't meet the criteria, and that you have comments that we could take and address here, if you tabled it, we could come back with those revisions to see if it did fulfill what your recommendations were. I mean, I know we've done that in the past on other projects to this very board.
My biggest concern is just the the compatibility in the lot size.
Right.
In this location, there's not a transition from the other, highly dense, and to me, it just kind of keeps extending that density, and my question is, is that leapfrog development considered, how close is that to a commercial node, and do we want, and I
can tell you specifically addressing that was whenever we were looking at this, we were taking that transition that you had a block, we counted from Twin Beach to Bay Meadows, that you had a certain development style that was forming, and then once you crossed to the north, once you continued to the west, you would then have another development style that began to transition. But I wasn't looking at this as a transition in the middle of the block, so to speak, because some of the things that we understood were requirements of the Twin Beach was that access to the south that's shown there, because that access point was a requirement on the Twin Beach to connect to us for a future connection out to the north. So we weren't trying to put two connections there and to connect out to the north and connect to the south. That was something that was dictated to us by something that was previously approved.
Sure.
Well, it's also required by the subdivision
connectivity
regulations.
regs.
Right.
Yeah, sure.
So I just don't want to, some of this is kind of in like, well, we're trying to just hide something in the guise of a PUD and do this and that. You know, the reason it went to the PUD
No,
route
no.
and not a subdivision route was because of the fact there was a commercial component about it. And you don't have something in your land development regulations for zoning for residential that includes a commercial component unless you go through a PUD. So, and then if you do,
Or subdivide it into 2 parcels and then, you know, request
That's right.
rezoning. You know, B2, B4 for one and R2, R1, R3 for the other.
but you'd end up basically with the same as doing it under one, trying to give you an
Right.
idea
The
of
lot
what.
size would change.
But the lot size, I mean, my biggest issue, I'll just come right out and say it, is the lot size. I mean, I understand at some point this is gonna get developed, and when it is, I don't think the people in the audience will be happy regardless, but it's just too much density. I mean, I don't think you could lower the density enough, and I don't think you will, to make the people in the audience happy, because they probably want it to stay RA and have, you know, 2 to 3 acre lots. And I, you know, wish you'd do that. I mean, it'd be great. I wish more people in Fairhope would, but, you know, I understand the, you know, realism of the world, but to me, it's just, this is overly dense at a, you know, 3.18.
Well, again, the reason that number was arrived at was because before we ever started, we requested, you know, what was the PUD that was approved adjacent to us, because we didn't want to try to come in and cram something in there more than what was next to it. So we made this based on what was just approved and used that as a template. I mean, so we asked for a go-by, and the go-by was 3.1 units per acre with 52-foot wide and 75-foot wide lots. So, and that's what we did. So it wasn't something we came up with going, oh, how can we figure out? Because we could have gotten more lots in there doing all 52-foot lots.
And that's why we're here, to
Yeah.
tell you what we want and
Yeah.
what we like and
I know,
what's good and
so,
what's
but I'm
bad.
just saying, we had, it wasn't like we did this in a vacuum, though. We asked, and worked with staff ahead of time to try to address some of these things. And that's why we brought this plan, because it was reflective of the plan to the south of it and everything. So it wasn't something that where they go, hey, let's go in there and figure out how many, what's the most number of lots you can get on there, because as Mike had mentioned, that if, you know, if the properties to the west and all those around it that were R2, you know, if they have a greater density allowable than what this would, by us asking for the two.
Wait, what? The R2 has a greater density allowable than
Yes.
this? 6,700 square
R-
foot lots? I don't think so.
Density,
The
density and lot
overall
size are not the
density-
same, though.
The overall, for R2, the density is 4.15, where the
Units per
requested
acre.
overall density for this development, I believe is what Ms. Rector is trying to say, is 3.18.
Right.
So if it was R2, then the allowable density would be 4.15 for any development that is zoned R2.
But
Prior-
then the
prior to the
effective
deduction.
density, once you take out roads
Correct.
and right-of-ways and stormwater, is going to be less than
Right,
that.
and this is the effective density on this one is 3.1, because the stormwater, the rights of ways and everything have been deducted from that to come up with that number that we were presenting.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
if it were zoned R2, and then the effective density would be less than 3.1.
And the ticket, as it compares to the Twin Beach development, is your location. I mean, that is a difference. That's a pretty big difference to me, is your location. If you were right down next to them on Twin Beach Road, then that would be, I would say, yeah, that would be a good reason to use the same density, to use the same thought process as what they use for Twin Beach, but you're not. Now you're up on Bay Meadow,
You're
which.
more closer to Firethorn. really.
That, and I mean, and you're gonna be right there at a main intersection on 181.
I feel like Firethorn should have been a lot more of a cognitive density model. It seems practical to me, they're going to be right across the street from each other.
Yeah. So I guess and I don't mean to, but what you want us to do short of making a recommendation to city council to approve it?
Well, I'd like to know the specific issues that we could address, and that that we could table this and try to address those and
Okay,
bring it
well,
back to you.
that's fine, and you've heard all the comments, but I don't think we're gonna sit here right now with the agenda we've
I'm
got.
asking you to give
We'll
me
give you the comments, but we
Yeah.
certainly.
I think these gentlemen understand.
Okay, so you would like it tabled?
Yeah, before.
I had a motion, Mr.
Before a
Chairman.
denial, I
You have
would,
something
I
else?
Can I
would
just
like it.
summarize though, because I think, I mean, some of the things that were said, a few things were, a PUD should be a little more innovative, and what if there are, is more density and then larger areas of open space? I would love to see something not exactly like that.
Understand.
Maybe a little more diversity of development instead of the whole thing evenly distributed. So just to be clear,
Yeah.
Firethorn
I
might be one
understand.
model, or it might be,
Yeah. Again, we asked for a
cluster density.
template, and the one we were given looks exactly like this, so.
That's fine.
So that's,
We understand.
if that's not the
We understand
template we
your-
want to go by, we want to get a different template to go by, because,
Gotcha.
those over there are 75s and 52s in the middle, and that's kind of what we tried to, because this is not the original configuration we had. This was revised based on the comments received to make it more like Twin Beach. So if that's not the route we want to go, then we'd love a shot to be able to try to make it something different.
I've got a motion to table. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay.
Well, what's the time frame for which we tabled it?
Reasonable period,
Excuse me?
a reasonable period. There's no specific
Okay, thank you.
time set out in the ordinance.
Okay. All right, next item on the agenda, SD, which is a subdivision, 1919.
Okay. Yeah, I cannot do that for you.
That'll be Nancy Milford.
This is yours.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
So,
No, it's
Mr.
still on
Chairman.
the agenda.
Bit of a work session before, and that's later on the agenda.
No, sir, Mr. Chairman, if you
Oh,
look
is
at
it not?
ZC,
Oh, I skipped one, never mind.
19.08.
I took it out of my, thank you, sir, I took it out of my stacked agenda and just skipped on down to the next one.
and, Mr. Chairman, it's a bit noisy in here,
Yes.
so
We can wait for
We'll
Art
wait
to
just a
return
moment.
too. Where did my agenda go?
Hey, can I come with you? Richard, can I come with you? All right, I'm on the way.
So Chairman, Commissioners, for item number ZC 19.08, this is essentially for this meeting's purposes, memorializing on the record that we discussed the Greeno Road Corridor Overlay District during the work session preceding this meeting. Staff is not requesting the commission take any action other than provide advisement and feedback on the draft of the corridor that you've seen. And we had the opportunity to speak about it and have some feedback, which is preserved in that meeting's video. So no action required today at this time. Just a brief comment, Commission, that let's talk about schedule going forward very briefly. Staff's intent is to, utilizing the feedback we heard today and additional feedback that you'll provide, bring you a further edited document for the July 1st meeting, and the intent is to have the illustrations in that document as well. And Chairman, I had a chance to talk to Mr. Watson for a few minutes before the meeting about that. It may be advantageous for the commission not to take action on that July 1st meeting, but we will make that determination when we get the document prepared on that meeting. So there's the possibility that you may not want to consider it until the August meeting, and we will work through that as we develop the document. And so just wanted to, like we said, memorialize for this meeting that we did have a work session discussing it. That agenda item, that first draft of that document is in the electronic agenda of this meeting, so that way it can be downloaded and viewed by members of the public. So thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Buford. I'll go ahead and open the public hearing at this time. Does anybody, and there will be another public hearing to this, and the staff certainly and us.
Yes, sir.
Commissioners will be open to hear any comments you have, but if you have anything you'd like to add at this time, now is a chance. Yes, sir, Mr. Green.
Good evening. Bobby Green, 415 Maple Street, 415 Greeno Road. Usually, as you know, Lee, last time I think we were up here at our rezoning, I said you'd seen the last of me. But anyway, I seldom do I speak from a document, but with your permission, I'd like to read a response to the draft the city's prepared. And I have a copy for everybody.
Hello, Bob.
I think I got two.
Okay, sir.
Thanks, sir. And I apologize for the length of this, so Lee, if I go over my time, just cut me off.
Do you want to read the whole thing, or do you want us to, highlight it and we read it? Because again, this is, we've got a whole slew of
I know,
changes
you've got a
between that.
long
And
agenda.
if you read the whole thing, people are probably going to just drift off and not remember the highlights, so it's up.
I
it's
was
up to
already
you.
drifting off.
Remembering 4-minute attention spans.
Okay, well, I'll do my best. Mr. Turner, you've spoken many times about simplifying the regulations and fixing that convoluted use table that the city uses with all the symbols and such that has been problematic before, such as when you approved the bank on Greeno Road and Edward Street.
We didn't approve that, the city council did. We made a motion to not
the-
approve it, and the city council
I apologize.
didn't follow our recommendation on that one. But it looks beautiful, I would
It
like
does.
to say.
It's an asset, Fairhope.
And
But
just what
that
we
use
needed, another
table
bank. I think that's
became a
number
problem
14.
at the time. And also, our former planning director, Wayne Dye, spoke to Greeno Road in particular, only to buffering, landscaping, lighting, a walkability nature, and visual enhancements rather than rigid regulations, which he was, in all his time here, opposed to rigid regulations. But what those initial conversations have led to, they morphed into a morass of regulations that are designed to squash development on Greeno Road while pushing developers into the unzoned, mostly county-regulated, and Fairhope single tax colony-owned Highway 181 corridor. Now, a private developer, as Buford just mentioned, is required to notify by certified mail anyone affected by any zoning changes. The city is hereby asking you to change the zoning of a privately owned strip of land that is nearly 6 miles long and 800 feet in width without the notification of any of the affected property owners, nor those within 300 foot of those affected directly. The GRD has come up with 5 zones, which seems rather convoluted process, each with its own sets of do's and don'ts. We consider it to be conceived in bad faith in the fact that none of the property owners affected have been contacted at all for any input toward this. And through no fault of the planning department, I think they've been placed in an untenable and awkward position, perhaps by some politicians, to defend a document that's rather undefendable. And I can't speak for everyone directly offended here, but I can speak to our own experience on this corridor. We've been there for 86 years under continual use and 7 decades of building permits being issued. At the time we were rezoned, we went even further, presenting a mixed-use idea of a garden center, restaurant, coffee shop, mixed retail. Our thought, and I think y'all all agreed at the time, was adding a little life to that corridor of Greeno Road, rather than just being a commuter back and forth to Mobile artery. Unanimous approval was given by this body and the city council to that rezoning. When our partners toward that could not realize that development, the property was placed for sale with White Spunner Realty, who are well aware, as you all are, because we sent you a letter, that we were placing certain caveats on any land use and restrictions on our property for certain land uses. as we had promised verbally to this body and to the city council. And ironically, when we placed the properties for sale, a lot of innovative ideas were brought to the table to us. But unfortunately, there's a 9-month, and it might be extended, moratorium that's made this property and all others along Greeno Road unmarketable to anyone who might be interested in development there. The GRD is purportedly based on the city's visual preference survey, but in that survey, the highest positives were for mixed uses and walkability between retail, service, and residential communities. The GRD leaves one of the city's most highly used facilities, the recreational facility, and the ball fields on Atlanta, as they have always been, with no relationship to the surrounding community or given typical amenities that might serve families and tourists without getting in their vehicles and driving, and as Jack Burrell said, usually to a different zip code. The GRD even eliminates by code, and again, that's that table, the very things the world needs to survive: agriculture, plant nursery, at least I'd argue that, and farmers markets. They're eliminated from any discussion on Greeno Road. We currently have a garden center, plant nursery, and agriculture facility. None of those three would be allowed north of Old Time Feed. I had to get that dig in there to Cecil. So what are we left with? Well, we could have a bank, but not a bank with a drive-through. When have any of you last seen a bank built anywhere that didn't have a drive-through? We could have a smaller grocery store with an attached pharmacy.
Three in Fairhope in the past 2 years, but
Downtown.
belabor that point.
Not on an artery.
You asked.
Not on what y'all consider a automobile corridor. We could have a grocery store with a pharmacy, but if the pharmacy has a drive-through, it's not allowed. We could have a coffee shop, but not a coffee shop with a drive-through. We can have a restaurant, but even a nice one like Panera Bread would be out of the question because they now require a drive-through. We were told that the driving force for change was that visual preference survey, which is ostensibly a tool toward long-range comprehensive planning for all of Fairhope. However, for some reason, these draconian regulations in the GRD are contrary to the very findings of that survey, which touts mixed uses, retail, restaurants, light but effective landscaping. All those were overwhelmingly preferred, but what this GRD does is force more congestion into certain areas that are already overly congested. These so-called districts, which are of the village of Publix and the village of Piggly Wiggly, which are villages without a population. But what y'all have an opportunity to do is fill in these areas between these so-called villages and make Greeno Road a livable area for all the surrounding neighborhoods to the west and east. I'll skip over some things here.
Well, I mean, I read this. I'm a speed reader actually and read it. And my question is, I see a lot about what you don't like. What do you think we should do?
Well, I
mean,
why
my
in all
feeling
these
is
years.
Every time we bring something up, and I agree with you, this is too complicated. All I really care about is the aesthetics of people driving by.
Me too,
You
and
know,
that's
to me,
what.
if it's a shooting range in the backyard, you know, as long as it looks attractive on the front, you know, the number one thing that everybody agrees with Fairhope is protect the central business district, because that makes Fairhope Fairhope. And when everybody in Fairhope agrees with something that's amazing, the number two that gets a little more problematic is don't allow Greeno Road to look like Airport Boulevard. But then people say nobody can live on Greeno Road. So where are we? What do you say we do? Well, you say what we shouldn't do. And I agree this is a little more complicated than I thought. I just wanted stuff like no drive-throughs, because when you get that 7-unit drive-through, you got the flat roof, and that's what makes Airport Boulevard look bad. Drive-throughs, drive-through signs, rear-facing buildings, and parking lots in front of the building. The main thing I would like to see is buildings pulled up, good landscaping, parking in the rear, and no drive-throughs.
Well-
But what do you think?
There are
we-
drive-throughs in this, though. I mean, when you were saying there's no drive-throughs, they're here.
Right, but I'm just saying as far as.
They're not
as-
allowed in certain portions of those
In certain
five.
portions of the deal, but what do you think we should do? We got what we shouldn't.
Well, there are
What should we
drive-throughs
do?
and there are drive-throughs. There's a
Well, forget about the
Hardee's
drive-through
drive-through
in general, what do you think should be
and there's a
allowed?
Starbucks drive-through.
What-
They're
what do you-
they're apples and oranges.
But when we go through and we start rezoning land, everybody says all this R1 doesn't belong in Greeno, like y'all told us for years. So as we start rezoning it, do we just rezone it and trust everybody's gonna sing kumbaya because they love Fairhope so much that they're gonna make sure that whatever they sell the land to is gonna be something beautiful? Which again, I've already done my premise of we're all hypocrites, and if somebody gives me enough money, you know, I'm selling my parents' land and putting next door to them a mini storage. If you pay me, I'll put up, you know, for a couple $100 million, I'll put a cell phone tower in my mama's backyard. There's a price at which we all give in. But the question is for those of us that have lower standards of prices that we give in, i.e. me, what do we do to protect Greeno Road? You tell me.
Well, there are numerous regulations already in place for the rest of Fairhope, aren't there not? Are they full of faults? Is the sign ordinance for all of Fairhope faulty? Are the architectural controls from the planning department, are they deficient in some way?
They don't necessarily address Greeno Road properly.
And there's this separate district for the central business district that addresses downtown with special conditions. And
You have
this
the
is a
hospital
similar effort.
overlay business, I mean, they all have, you know, you've got to understand Greeno Road is different than Fairhope Avenue. It's different, you know, in the downtown area. It's different than Morphe
Is it
Avenue.
different to the degree that a neon sign is cool in downtown Fairhope and prohibited on Greeno Road? I mean, if you get down in the weeds of this thing, it's a mess.
Well, the specifics are what would be helpful.
Yeah, and we can't, you know, sit here for 3 hours, and this isn't a committee meeting now. This is a public hearing, and, you know, I would suggest come up with some positive ideas. You know, every time we've tried to do this in the 18
okay,
years I've been on here, people
I
have said,
understand,
well,
but
we
let
don't
me-
like it
let me
today.
address that.
We've thrown it in the
I'm
garbage.
trying.
And I don't want to rezone any residential.
You just
until we have
referenced,
some protections.
you just referenced a beautiful bank. There was another beautiful bank. There was another structure that Robert built on North Greeno Road. Are there anything deficient in any of those? What's
wanna hurt your
wrong with that?
feelings,
What's
but-
wrong so far with the development as it is proceeded on Greeno Road? That you have to come up with these burdensome
Well,
regulations?
the OBGYN that's not in the city limits, I think, looks horrible because it's got that asphalt right in front of it, and then the parking right in front of that with two entrances, and I think it's the opposite and antithesis of, you know, what would be like. But I can go down and hurt a lot of people's feelings, but I would rather not. And
So-
I think we can simply make a few recommendations. Maybe this is too complicated. Basically, pull the buildings out to the front and have the parking in the rear would be 90, you know, would cure 90% of the problems, that
I
and the sign
absolutely
ordinance.
agree with that 100%. And Wayne and I had that conversation. And he assured us, when we were in the process of rezoning, that that was the intent on Greeno Road. Parking in the rear, landscaping, walkability, sidewalks. The biggest improvement you can make is authorizing Richard to get the utilities placed underground. That one thing would enhance Greeno Road more than any other thing you could possibly do. But coming up with what is essentially, we consider an illegal taking of a 6-mile strip of land without any input from a single landowner along there?
Well, we're getting input right now. I mean, this is how zonings are done, and it's
But it's
people
after
mention
the
it's state law.
fact.
It's not after the fact. This is not being voted on. We're
Bobby,
coming
this
back.
is, I can assure
We're coming
you,
back in July or probably August, they're telling us. So,
a number of us have been down that road with long durations of property issues with the city. But I can assure, from my perspective, this is the first blush, throw it out there, tell me what you think about it, but let's get some real down home input from people that actually are going to be affected. But what we've got to be able to do is pull it into a general, really, a more simple, general approach to developing Greeno Road. And it's like Lee said, like you said, landscaping, buildings up front, parking in the rear, and, I mean,
Buffers
we don't
for
want, and
residents.
buffers and lighting. Lighting to me is the biggest deal. Worst thing I think can happen is walk out at night and not be able to see the stars.
I agree.
But that's another whole issue. But if we can get to that point, and certainly we're not going to please everybody. You try to hope you please some of the people some of the time. You ain't going to please all the people all the time. But at the same time, if we can get to that point on Greeno Road, then we will have jumped light years ahead of where it's been in the last 50 years.
Well, I agree with all of that, and you said to remain positive. All those are positive things. We agreed with all of those when they were suggested. The GRD addresses those to a small part, but it goes so much further.
Well, take it,
into
rip it
private
up,
property
take it, rip it
rights.
up with a pen and give it back to Beaufort with your ideas on it. And
Yes,
we'll
well.
accept it. And we need to keep on moving so we're not here
I
till 1 a.m.
understand.
It hurt my head to read through it too.
Yeah.
Okay,
But
thank
I
you for
appreciate
that.
it, Bobby.
I
but-
can assure you.
But put it down in writing, because this is a long way to go, long way to go.
Okay, well, let me ask one more question. This would be addressed to Robert. If it's a long way to go, how far is that moratorium going to stretch?
I don't know if he's prepared to answer that now.
I can't answer that individually.
You know,
Okay,
that'd be a
I'll-
vote.
I'll
Anyway,
give you my cell phone number.
all right. Thank you very much, Bobby. Anybody else wish to speak to this item? And keep it to an hour and a half or less, please.
Hi, my name is Anna Miller, and I live at 257 Wesley Street, and we also own the lot across the street at 211 Wesley Street. Our home is about 600 feet from Greeno on the bay side. And then our lot across the street, the back end of that is about 400 feet from Greeno. So I'd share with what Mr. Green said. I was curious as to why there wasn't a notification. I know it's not technically a rezone, but there's a use table that seems like it would essentially serve as a rezone. So there might be a lot of other adjacent property owners that are interested in this process, but they just have no idea that it's happening because their lives are busy and they don't get the packets like I do and watch these meetings.
Well, we can't go door to door, but an email goes out to over 2,000 people. And in Fairhope, people seem to know about everything, even what they shouldn't know about. Right. But over 2,000 emails go out. It's been advertised in the newspaper. We discussed it in our last 3 meetings, which are put out over the internet. So Beaufort at the city council meeting, which is also put out over the internet, mentioned it. So anybody that keeps up with Fairhope and what's going on with the city council or the planning and zoning commission would know about it.
Right.
Anybody that doesn't keep up with the city council and planning and zoning commission, yeah, I'm sorry.
Well, I guess what I'm trying to understand
What
is.
do you think we should do? A certified letter to everybody in the city for $10,000?
I just don't know what the
or-
difference
For
is.
zoning
Because
change
when that bank rezone happened at the corner of Edwards and Greeno, we got a notification, so I'm just
Right.
confused about what the difference
The
is.
notifications go in the newspaper that nobody reads anymore nowadays. That's by law, we have to put newspaper notification.
We got one in the mail because we were 300 feet from the
I'm just
property.
saying, for these things, the newspaper does the notification. That's the state law.
But she's saying she got
Why
one in
is
the
it-
mail for the
she's
bank,
saying
but she
it
hadn't,
feels like
didn't
a
get one for
zoning
this.
change.
I
Right.
understand,
Zoning change.
but I'm just saying, for this, the requirement is,
This is technically, yes, it's a zoning change, but it's a zoning amendment to the regulations. It's not site-specific. I mean, it is, but it's not, we are specifically changing the zoning of this site. We're not changing your underlying zoning.
Okay.
The underlying zoning will remain. This is an additional overlay that gives guidance as to how to develop it.
Okay.
but not to be rude, if you have any changes, you need to talk to our state legislators if you have any changes that,
I'm just
everybody
curious.
tells us, and normally when somebody says they don't like the notice they got, it means they don't like what's coming up, not the notice. Just like when somebody says they believe that there needs to be more transparency. It's not the transparency, it's they don't like the law, but what is your feeling on the actual, overlay district?
I wasn't meaning to say that I was angry or anything about that. I just don't understand what the difference is, but thank you for explaining
The
that.
difference is, the change is a general change like this, that's
Right.
not a site-specific. The state law requires that it goes to the newspaper, which nowadays nobody reads. We probably ought to just give it to a half dozen people on Facebook, and then everybody would know what's going on. But we haven't figured out how to put it on Facebook yet.
That makes sense.
But we do send out 2,000 emails.
If you are registered for the Everbridge, are you registered for that?
No, but I get the planning commission packet, so I'm aware of this going on. I just was curious about what the difference was, and now I understand it. So thank you for explaining
And
that.
we will be sending it out again over Everbridge. We have done that once already, which is site-specific, and we can pick a group. But the only way you get it is if you've registered for it. But, I mean,
Which my husband gets those notifications, so.
But this is the
thank you.
same as any change in any ordinance that the city makes. Whenever the city makes a change in an ordinance, then it gets advertised in the newspaper.
Got it. And so if something, this is the overlay, but if something gets rezoned, it would go through the normal rezoning process like any other time? Okay, perfect. Thank you. The other thing, just from a broad perspective that I was wondering is this all the work of the planning department, or who's been involved kind of in determining the boundaries and that kind of thing?
So, Mr. Chairman, I'm happy to address that if you'll allow me to speak on that. That is a staff level. This is a staff level endeavor. Now, I will thank Wayne Dice for his assistance as much as he's been able to, both prior to leaving the city of Fairhope. But this is not consultant-driven. This is staff-driven. And Chairman, Commissioners, and to the public, understand that at the staff level, we evaluated probably at least a half dozen zoning ordinances from around the country, as close as Mountain Brook, as far away as Traverse City, Michigan. In addition, we consulted the SMART Code, which contains the various transects of development, which is a type of form-based code, which is probably more sophisticated than necessary for this particular endeavor right now. And Chairman, Commissioners, understand that we know an overhaul of the comprehensive plan is forthcoming, funded by the Restore Act. And we know that's coming, we know that's forthcoming. It is probably a reasonable expectation that when that comprehensive plan is completely rewritten, that it will be necessary to rewrite probably major portions of the zoning ordinance to make the two documents agree. In the interim, we've heard loud and clear from the citizens that they want to see some type of action taken by this staff and by this city about Greeno Road. And an overlay is, in this staff's opinion, the best way to accomplish that now. It is not the sophistication level of a brand-new zoning district, but it will give staff and the city some tools to work with when evaluating development. Some of the aspects you've seen, Commissioners, are complicated, especially lighting, because to accomplish the protections that we believe the public desires requires writing a technical standard, and that is a bit difficult to place into an overlay. But that is why we're thankful to have this opportunity to hear this feedback now, and that I think that we possibly do simplify it. I think it's better we tried to throw a lot of things at it, and it's easier to simplify it than it is to go back and rewrite it and make it more complicated. So we welcome that feedback and are thankful for those comments. And ma'am, thank you for allowing me to interject right there.
No, thank you. And actually, I appreciate Mr. King sent me a link to the directors meeting. I believe it was last week, and it was discussed even further then. And I really appreciate that and the responsiveness that I've gotten from Mr. King about this, because I have been asking about it for a little while, and that's fine. We're all busy. That's fine. So that's good. So there's not like a committee that we can be involved in because it's being done by the planning department primarily, or city personnel, people in a professional capacity with the city.
That's correct,
Okay.
but you've got it, and if you want to make any, pencil one in, make any changes, please do, and give them to Buford. That's why we're here.
Totally.
We're not so much looking for input on the process, we're looking for input on
I'm just trying to
ideas
understand it.
and what you think needs to be changed, tweaked, made better, what scares you about it, what you like about it. That's why we're here.
Where here comes the part you're looking for.
Just one second. I do want to say, sorry.
That's okay.
That this document was put together based on the results from the visual preference survey, which was done by anyone and everyone that wanted to do it. That was sent out, it was posted online, we had meetings here, several meetings here. So it's not just staff driven. I mean, yes, we're
The staff is doing what we're asking, and we've had numerous that, and we've also had numerous
basing it on what
meetings
the
with.
citizens
Yeah,
requested.
we've had meetings with hundreds and hundreds of people.
Well, and
you
I
know,
remember in
discussing.
2012 going to a meeting about it, and so I know this is a long time coming, and I'm
Yes.
not opposed to it. So I just want to be clear about that. Just from the draft that I went through, I really appreciate the consideration of light trespass a lot. That's something I never really knew would bother me until I started seeing some of these new lights going up on Greeno, and I can actually see them from my house even though it's a ways away. And so I think that's great and important. And also with that bank on the corner of Edwards and Greeno, I know some folks on Ingleside Terrace who are not here tonight had some issues with the lighting coming into their backyard. So I'm so glad to hear that y'all are being proactive with that. And I hope that will extend to the Gateway District that we are in and not just the north and south ends. And then I actually like the drive-through limits, especially at the things that would be open at night, because that is going to disturb nearby residential neighborhoods, and I think that's a great idea. One thing, as far as the parking in the rear, I understand that's more aesthetically pleasing from the main road. I would just ask there be significant buffers with vegetation and also with the lighting considerations and hours and things like that, just to make sure that if it's being pushed behind, that it then doesn't become the residential community then is having to see the thing that the people on the highway didn't want to see. And last but not least would be to, if the parking lots are behind, just making sure that a residential neighborhood street does not become an access road to get behind those buildings, because I know there's limits with how many cut-ins you can have from highways, and so just really thinking about how that's going to interact with those residential areas. And that's all I have for now, and I appreciate y'all listening and giving us an opportunity to give this input, and I'll just follow up, I guess, at another time. I mean, what's the best way to stay involved other than
Ma'am, you're
coming
welcome to
these?
email me directly.
Okay. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the input. Anybody else wish to speak to this item? Yes, sir.
Hello. My name's Ron Ross, and I live at 811 Gayfer Avenue. And I've been there 10 years. And when I bought the house, there was nothing across from me. So I've been through a little bit of this process as they built the orthopedic building across from me. So I actually face the parking lot. So I'm at Gayfer and Maple. So Maple is the next street off of Greeno. So I have some of the same concerns that Anna has, in that I really hope that they will take in consideration that I like the fact that there are districts, that I'm in the Gateway District, that they take some considerations to the 400-foot distances on both sides, because that's in my yard, or basically at my mailbox.
Right.
So I just want to ask for that consideration for certain districts, that maybe it isn't 400 feet, that if I get the fact that you want parking in the back, that would be parking on my other side. So literally, I would have parking in front of me and parking to my left. So a buffer was put in place with the orthopedic.
What is the buffer that's required between commercial and residential?
And so, Commissioners, and in the tree and landscaping ordinance, which is a standalone ordinance number 1444, whenever you have, and I'll just be general right here, wherever you have an incompatible land use buffer, such as a commercial activity adjoining a residential area, you have multiple options, but the landscape buffer can be impervious natural forest. It can be an 8-foot opaque fence with a 6-foot tall planting in front of it, or it can be a double row of 6-foot tall plantings. Are the options, are some of the options for incompatible land use buffers. Now, without going back through it all and spending a bunch of time going on it, the GRD actually enforces and requires that in several locations throughout the various districts, primarily where there would be a commercial activity abutting a residential activity.
Okay, good, thank you very much. And this was similarly explained to me when they did the one across the street. So I just share concern because they did put 2 layers of landscaping at about 3 feet high. They built the parking lot about 5 feet high. So for about 5 years, when the time would change and we would go into daylight savings time, I had all of the traffic leaving that parking lot in my front living room window for an hour every day. So that's when I don't want to look at another 8-foot fence if I don't have to look at that. So I appreciate that, and I'll stay in communication with you as that progresses, because it really wasn't clear if it would be other considerations we made based on the residential closeness to this.
Yes.
Thanks.
Thank you. All right, thank everybody for your input. I'll go ahead and close the public hearing at this time, and we'll move on the agenda. And now I think I'm hopefully correct in saying SD, subdivision
Can we make,
1919.
since we rushed through it in the beginning, can I just make one more comment on it? Is there a commissioner comment? I know my concerns with the light trespass, that I think even with an 8-foot high fence, if you have parking lights that are much higher than that, or a little higher than that, or further back, I see it's being regulated by wattage, but the brightness of a 250 watt, whatever it is, LED, you know, it differs on your type of light. That's just power. That's nothing to do with lumens and brightness.
Sure.
And I'd love to see the bug rating system, backlight, uplight, glare, where you're really looking at what light escapes the property boundaries and glare. It has uplight component of it too, so you're also looking at light pollution.
Right.
I think that might be more effective than the
No, that's a
lights.
great comment, and I thank you for that, because today's LED lighting is incredibly sophisticated,
And very bright.
and the advantage, of course, is that it's extremely bright and with low power consumption. The negative side is that it's extremely bright, but can be aimed and better utilized. So all of those are certainly valid. I will say, Commissioners, that may be something that is better suited to a zoning district, because as I can tell, this overlay is getting very complicated. So we'll evaluate how much to use and where to place it.
And I'm not gonna go into any great detail about lighting, but it seems to me that the opportunity would be to incorporate that in all of our subdivision ordinances.
Well, lighting is in the landscape ordinance.
I mean, it's a matter of focusing the lighting. You can be very direct now with lighting.
Exactly.
To the point that you don't get any up lighting, and you don't get any light that really escapes where
I
it's
thought we
pointing.
required that already.
It is, it's
Yeah.
in the regulations
So
already.
there is a lighting requirement in the subdivision regulations
That's
right
right.
now. And we almost certainly need to, regardless of overlays, we almost certainly need to modernize it to reflect
I agree.
the capacity and the abilities of LED lighting.
Yep.
Exactly. Well, and then in this particular instance, we've got a really interesting phenomenon where we're really urban on one side and residential on the other, and we're pushing the parking lot towards the back. So it seems like there's a different situation at the buffer here.
That's what I was going to suggest, is in the overlay district for the entire thing, because a lot of it does back up to residential, that I think that buffer requirement that's standard in our reg really needs to be beefed up along
Yeah.
overlay district.
Okay.
Agreed.
All right, moving along, SD 1919, Nancy?
Let's get on with
Do I have a motion?
it. Motion.
Okay, this is public hearing to consider the request of the Martinet Family Trust for plat approval of the Martinet subdivision. It's a 2-lot minor subdivision. The property is located on the south side of the intersection of Kane Lane and Laraway. The applicant is Edward and Miss Roseanne Martinet, and the authorized representative is Mr. Seth Moore, and he is here tonight. The total site acreage is 1.99 acres, and actually, you all heard this application last month. There were some issues that they needed to work out at the front lot line to keep a 75-foot lot frontage, and they worked that out, and Buford looked at it as well, along with Richard Johnson. They explored all sorts of options, like donating some of the right-of-way to us. There were all sorts of things, but they finally came up with a 75-foot lot width at the 35-foot front setback line. So that has been satisfied, and there's just a couple of comments or conditions. One was the existing shop building on lot 1 would have to be removed. And also, this is an area, thank you, Buford. This is an area that does not currently have a sidewalk, but, and Richard's not here, but I think he went into it last time, why it's really not a good location for a sidewalk. There's nothing to tie to. It's an odd curve. But if you all wanted to grant a waiver, and they did make the waiver request for the sidewalk exemption, but if you wanted to add a pedestrian easement in lieu of requiring the sidewalk, you could do so.
Seth, anything to add?
There was one thing about the existing shed garage. We did put a note on the plat stating that they would tear that down prior to any building permit being granted. That right now they're using it for storage, things like that.
That's a hard thing to regulate from our side. We typically require they be removed prior to moving forward.
Like I said, we did put that on the plat, and I believe, didn't we ask for a variance on that? No? Oh, well. Again, we had put that on the plat, thought we had ironed that out, but apparently not, but.
No, we've said all
Yeah.
along that we do this for every application. We require them to remove the existing structure. Because it doesn't meet our zoning ordinance. It is forward of the front building line of, and it's a hard thing to regulate. Our building department is very busy.
Mhm.
If they miss that, then we would have a non-compliant situation, so that's why we do not allow that.
Take it down.
Seth, is the intention to have both lots served by one driveway?
Yes, sir.
Okay. That's what it looks like. It's just hard to tell if the easement goes back far enough to accommodate that to the line on the
Yes, sir.
east
Well,
side.
yeah, they were trying to do that because the other lot, really, if you put it in there, you've got a manhole, you got a power pole.
That's what I'm
And
at.
it.
We don't have to do
very
anything
hard.
with either one of them.
Yeah.
Thanks, Seth. I'll go ahead and open the public hearing. If you'll take one step to the side, I'm opening the public hearing at this time. Anybody wish to speak to this item? All right, I'm closing the public hearing. You can step back to the side.
Motion, Mr. Chairman.
I have a motion to approve.
No, I didn't. Whoa. Wait a minute. How do you know I didn't make a motion that I was, we didn't want to approve it?
Excuse me, okay, motion to deny.
Motion to approve case SD 19.19, subject to staff recommendations, granting a waiver for sidewalk exemption, but adding the easement, pedestrian easement, that would allow that to be there, but you got to get the building off the lot.
I've got a motion. Do I have a second? Second. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. Motion passes unanimously. Next item, SD 1923. Yes, sir.
Good evening
Right.
again. He said this is SD 1923. This is a Calvert 4-lot minor subdivision. This also, similar to the previous case, was an informal review during our last planning commission meeting. The owner and applicant is Rivers and Mandy Calvert, and the piece of property is located on County Road 33, or River Park Road, south of County Road 32, across from Meadow Road. And the engineer of record is Stuart Smith, who is with us here this evening. And it's a public hearing to consider the request of Rivers and Mandy Calvert, the owner and applicant of the 4-lot minor subdivision. Subject property is approximately 10 acres, and the applicant wishes to divide the property into 4 lots as a family subdivision. On the screen, you can see on the left is the zoning map, which is lack of color. And don't let that fool you. It is all unzoned property. This is south of any zoned property that the city has. It does fall in Fairhope's ETJ, which extends all the way to Fish River and all the way down to Mobile Bay. On the right is an aerial view of the piece of property. Copy of the plat furnished. As you can see, there is a easement going down parcel D to service parcel C and parcel B as far as access. Parcel B and parcel C does not have frontage upon a publicly paved, maintained road, which the applicant is requesting a waiver from, and we'll get to that in just a second. Baldwin County has an exemption in their regulations for family subdivisions. As we had mentioned before, the city's Fairhope subdivision regulations does not recognize this same exemption. Therefore, since the property is in Fairhope's extraterritorial jurisdiction, must follow Fairhope subdivision regulations. The applicant has received approval for the subdivision and meets the county requirements for the family exemption, which includes that each parcel shall have its own ingress and egress utility access of not less than 30 feet in width. And the Fairhope subdivision regulations, Article 5, Section E.3a, states that all lots shall front upon a paved, publicly paved, maintained street. And as I mentioned, the proposed subdivision has 2 lots that will not front on a paved, publicly maintained street, and the applicant has requested a waiver.
Where's the,
What about the
where are the 2 lots that have access to a public street? The first one that's on the street, where's the other one?
Parcel D, the flag-shaped lot, that easement is goes across parcel D.
Okay.
So parcel D accesses, and I'll go back to the.
Whoa, right there. What is
Yes,
it?
sir. That
Parcel D
hatched in.
fronts the road.
Yes, sir.
Parcel A. and
Parcel
C.
A and parcel D.
So this is still A.
That
So
that hatched
you're
in.
creating, wait a minute, you're not. They're creating a flag lot out of parcel A, is that what it is? So this is, the easement is not actually, it's not a right-of-way, it's an easement?
Yes, sir.
Is that what that is?
Yes, sir. It's an ingress egress easement that is required through the Baldwin County regulations, and that is what they have on their preliminary plat as shown here. So that easement is on the furthest parcel.
That
back on-
easement's on parcel A.
Yes, sir. That's on private property. So parcel B and parcel C has access to that easement to use for access to their lots.
Oh, I see what you're trying to say.
Should it read easement for parcels B, C, and D then?
No, parcel D has its own access
River Park
off
Road.
of River Park Road.
Well, I know that, but that doesn't mean you can't access his lot off of that easement, does it?
It does now because it doesn't, they don't have access on the recorded, or on the proposed plat. So that parcel D will not have access to use this easement as it is written now, which they don't need that easement to access their property, which could help.
Y'all don't have a problem with this?
Sir?
Y'all don't have a problem with this?
No, sir. Our recommendation is for approval of the waiver, not fronting upon it. And part of the big reason for this is there is really no light at the end of the tunnel for the property being annexed into the city, at least in probably my grandkids' generations even, for the general location of where this is. It just happens to be that it is in our extraterritorial jurisdiction, and staff is going to be looking into probably presenting something to the commissioners in the future of amending our regulations to adopt some type of language to include a family exemption or some type of exemptions for similar cases to this matter here. And the different waiver standards that we have in our regulations talk about an extraordinary hardship that may result from strict compliance with these regulations due to the typical unusual topographic or physical conditions. The waiver standards really contemplate more areas that are currently zoned or could become zoned in the near foreseeable future, which, as I mentioned, this parcel does not. Therefore, the extraordinary hardship requirement, really based on the physical characteristics, is inappropriate. The hardship would be more of the crossing of jurisdictions between the city of Fairhope and Baldwin County. The second condition, the condition is beyond the control of the subdivider. Again, that's really not applicable for this individual case based on the hardship being just a crossover of jurisdictions. The requested waiver will not have the effect of nullifying the purpose and intent of the regulations, the zoning ordinance, or the comprehensive plan. The subject property lies outside of the corporate limits of Fairhope, therefore nullifying this standard. And also note that the property lies outside of the police jurisdiction and the permitting jurisdiction. Finally, for the waivers, the minimum deviation required standard. The requirement from Baldwin County is 30 feet, and they're proposing to double that to 60 foot wide, which allows substantial area for the paved roadway and utilities if Baldwin County in the future had the need to accept this road or create a road for maintenance or for public use. And again, there's a couple other criteria to the waiver that really is hard to have effect with us.
I don't need to be, I was just asking, if you're fine with it, I'm fine with it. I don't care about, I care less about flag lots personally. I think we make a big deal about nothing on them. But I was just making sure y'all are okay with it.
Staff is in favor of this.
This will be in the city limits in your lifetime, much less your grandkids. Don't kid yourself about that. My dad used to go
if it is,
fishing
I
with
would be fine with that.
My dad used to go fishing where Bel Air Mall is right now, so, and that was considered the country. Everything out across Broad Street in my granddad's time was considered in the country, so.
Right across the airport and university, they put the road over top of the creek.
I'm about to. I'll go ahead and, you done? We gotta move.
I'm finished.
All right, but I'll go ahead and open the public hearing at this time. Anybody wish to speak to this item? If not, I'll close the public hearing at this time. Does the developer wish to say anything to this, about this, Mike? He's here if there's any questions.
My name's Stuart Smith. I don't have really much anything more to say than what Mike.
So we got any questions? He's here. All right. Commissioners, any questions for the developer, staff?
Just with the family issue, what happens is, and I understand it's only for deeding parcels to immediate family members. Does that mean you can't sell it to a non-family member at some point in the future?
No, you can.
You can. That's
It seems
why
like the weakness
that
of
loophole is being closed. Some people would use the family subdivision, subdivide properties, and then, sell them a day later. So Art could tell you more about that than me, because we haven't recognized.
We had it, it's been in the county forever. But it's probably going to be shut down for that reason.
That was my.
It's the way a lot of people get by there.
I'd like to see it shut that down, but I have no problem with it.
It's amazing how many children people have when they go to doing that.
Right. When you can do it a time and then again and again and again.
That's right.
All right. I'll entertain a motion if there are no further questions, concerns.
So move subject to staff recommendations.
Do I have a second? Any further? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. Next item on the agenda, public hearing SD 1925, Riverwood Estates. Yes, sir.
All right. So you said this is SD 1925, River Place. The engineer of record is with us. Mr. Chris Lieb will be speaking on behalf of Austin Engineering. This is for a 23-lot major subdivision. This property is coincidentally located on County Road 33, also known as River Park Road, just south of 32, and is actually just, I think, 800 to 1,000 feet south of the last subdivision that we just did. The subject property is 24.2 acres. 18.06 acres is the first phase of development, with the smallest lot being 0.46 acres. So most of the lots in this area for the subdivisions are half acres or bigger. And the remaining remnant parcel of 6.14 acres is going to be left for some possible future development. And there is the zoning map void of color on the left and the aerial on the right. As you can see over the aerial, the portion that is that farmed field is the portion that is going to be the proposed 23-lot subdivision, and that wooded portion at this point in time is the remnant parcel that is left for a possible future development. On the screen is the zoning, or the submitted plat for your consideration, which we can go back to answer any possible questions. A little bit of the site data, again, it's 23 lots. The smallest lot's 46 feet. They're concurrent following with the county setbacks of front 40 feet, side 10, and 30-foot rear setbacks. Again, this piece of property is in the county. It's outside of our permitting jurisdiction, police jurisdiction. It is inside of our planning jurisdiction, therefore falls under the subdivision regulations and qualifies for a major subdivision. There was a community meeting held, and the signing sheet shows that 2 adjacent properties attended, and the minutes from that meeting reflected that there was concern for traffic and light at night. Other concerns were emailed and addressed by the engineer of record. By looking at some of those emails, most of the concerns were items that were to be addressed in private covenants of the subdivision if it was approved, such as size of houses, cost of housing, if there was going to be fencing put up, things of that nature. Paul Merchant, the City of Fairhope's horticulturist, approved the landscaping plan, and a tree protection plan was not needed. As I mentioned, the site is land. This land was used for farming. It is mostly bare of trees, and a letter from the engineer of record was provided stating that as well. Thought maybe you had a question.
Yeah.
Okay. A letter stating the proposed subdivision did not trigger a traffic study from Kenneth Nichols with Gulf Coast Traffic and Development Services was provided. 3 different LID techniques are going to be utilized, which will provide the required 80% or more total suspended solid removal. There are grass buffers and grass channels that provide a 50% TSS removal that'll pre-treat the majority of the site plus the additional drainage from the property off-site to the north. And all the storm water will be routed to a wet detention basin, which also provides an 80% TSS removal, which a weighted average for the entire site will then produce a 95% TSS removal. And the post-site development discharge will be less than the pre-development outflow. Green space for this subdivision will account for 10.05% of the development, which meets the requirement of the 10% per the subdivision regulations of Article 5, Section C.2. And again, that number is taken from the updated subdivision regulations of the net density of the site, removing detention in all right-of-way areas. Wanted to note there is eligible green space that is located in part of the drainage easements and detention pond area that were not calculated into the 10.05%. That 30% that could be counted towards the pond, which they're proposing that it has the 3-to-1 side slopes and be used for recreational area, was not counted. So it's coming in at the 10%, right at the 10%, but there's actually percentages that is not counted within that. The regulations contain the following criteria for the different approval standards. The first couple are not applicable as it is outside of all of cities' jurisdictions besides the planning jurisdiction, and it meets all the other requirements for this part of the regulations. Staff recommends approval of SD 1925 with the following conditions, and there are some typical conditions, some housekeeping. Add a note on the plat that the detention in common areas shall be maintained by the Property Owners Association and not Baldwin County or the state of Alabama, as they had noted on sheet 6 of the drawings. Add the curve and line data to the plat. The city will need a copy of the county's review and the county engineer's certificate of the review. And finally, the closeout testing reports shall include mandrel test on all HDPE stormwater drainage pipes. And just for, if you're not sure what that test is, they run a ball through the pipe to make sure that the pipe hasn't collapsed and it's not an egg or an oval shape that would hinder any of the stormwater drainage from occurring there. And I'll be happy to answer any questions that commissioners may have.
Any questions for staff? If not, anybody here would like to speak on behalf of the developer?
Good evening. I'm Chris Lieb with Lieb Engineering Company. I'm here on behalf of Austin Engineering to present this to you, and he did a pretty good job of saying everything that's part of the subdivision. We did, we meet the regs and did our layout the best we could. And if y'all have any questions for me, I'll answer them.
Okay.
But I'm the guy. Can you flip back to?
Well, wait just a second, sir. I'm going to open the public hearing in just 1 second. I'm going to open the public hearing in just 1 second. You'll sit down just 1 second. All right, any questions for the engineer while he's here?
Nope.
All right, thank you. All right, I'll go ahead and open the public hearing. If you can come up, you just need to state your name and your address.
My name's Crandall Langley, and I have River Park Road, 16885 River Park Road.
Okay.
My property is exactly running the whole length of theirs on the north side. And all I've asked for is, I don't care what y'all do with your property, because it's y'all's, but I do care about my privacy. Put that back up there. You mentioned lights. That's why I moved there 30 years ago. And if I could afford to buy it, I would have bought it, but I couldn't. I don't know if, can you put a pointer there? This is my house.
Yeah. It's tricky to keep track of.
That, the square here is mine.
Uh-huh.
Or my wife's, and my driveway comes down through here. And all I ask is trespassing. With all the houses you're gonna build, would you consider a fence? For each lot, is 100 feet. And there's a green space, and I could pay that fence for 100 feet. I think that's reasonable, everybody down through there. The other thing is pollution of lights, because I love my stars. That's what traffic out on 32 and 33. That's dangerous right there. You've had plenty of wrecks there. I know it's not in your jurisdiction.
Listen, I'm on here because I'm out of the ETJ. So I live out near there. They have a commissioner here who lives out in the ETJ. I drive through 32 and 33 twice a day.
Okay. Well, you know how bad it is.
I ride my bicycle by there sometime going the back way to Big Daddy. So I know that area real well.
Okay. So it is a dangerous area. I don't know. I know the city ends in the middle of 32, and then we're in the county.
Right.
So you really don't care.
Well, we do, but the thing is, we've got the subdivision regulations, and if he abides by them, then he's got his private property rights to do that. So we can ask him if he be consider.
Y'all are the planning commission.
We can ask him if he'll consider building a fence, and we
That's
can
what
ask
I'm
him
doing.
if he'll consider to do his lighting. But I'm saying we can't force him to.
Yeah,
I'm
I
saying we can ask
understand
him, and we'd be glad to ask him to do that.
I understand that. Who do I gotta talk to? You?
It's the developer we have to go through.
See, I've wrote all these things down for the prior meeting, and nobody's contacted me back for any of the things that I'm worried about. Trespassing into my property, I'm worried about. Dogs biting my grandchildren, I'm worried about. I will shoot the dog if it comes on my property, and then I'm gonna be arrested. But that will happen. So I need consideracy from the builders. That's not much to ask for, I don't believe. Because I don't care about the subdivision, that's somebody else's property. They can develop it however, but I do care about how it invades me.
Okay.
And you would too.
Of course. Sure. Thank you, sir. Anybody else wish to speak to this item?
Please.
Hello. Helen Horton, 16720 River Park Road.
I'm sorry, Helen Horton?
Yes.
And what's that address again?
16720 River Park Road. Yeah, I live on that road too, and it seems like the one way in, one way out is right opposite my house. That is, and my neighbour's Miss Jo's. We've been out there, established our homes. I've been out there for at least 15 years, and my neighbour's been out there for, and peaceful, quiet, and now we're going to get light shining in our house. That's like, intrusion, harassment. because my, let's see, what's it, yeah, and I agree with him. Where did he go? All right, 32, 33, yeah, it's a busy road, dangerous road. There have been people that's been killed on that road. I don't know if they're going to put up a traffic light to help that. Especially with all these houses going up, they probably need a firehouse extra. So, and I wanted to know, are our houses going to depreciate in value if we want to do resale because of all this, going up?
You have to have a crystal ball to know that. I mean, we can only enforce the subdivision regulations, not the property values.
But, okay, so what about these lights shining in our house at night?
There are regulations.
And there's 24 houses, so there's going to be at least 2, 3, maybe more cars per house. I know we had 5 cars at one time, a month ago.
It does look like, I don't know if it eases your mind or if it helps at all, but when I look at it, it seems like the ingress egress is sort of centered on the property line between 2 houses, where the worst case scenario would be as if it was coming out smack dab in the middle of a property aimed right at that house. It looks like, I don't know for sure if that's missing it, but it looks like it's most likely to not shine directly into a house based on where it's located. So, sorry.
Oh, it's going to be right on
Yeah.
in that time.
Yeah. Right. But, yeah, I mean, our house is like right here, so when they, you turn either way, it's still gonna, when you cut that corner, it's still gonna shine in our house, in our homes.
Right.
And we've been there for a long time, expecting that it was nice and quiet to get out of the city, and not bring everything this way.
Yeah.
And, let's see. Yeah, so it's going to be a lot, a lot of cars coming in and out. And then, school's going to start, and then you're going to get, and it's a narrow road.
Right.
For all those cars, for all those houses. And then school's going to be coming in. So you're going to, school traffic, work traffic, going back and forth. It's going to be heck trying to get out of 32. So I don't know why is there so many houses going in that little area?
That's what they chose to do. Earlier, Helen, if you noticed, that was a PUD, so we have some discretion on that. This is a subdivision, so basically if they meet the subdivision regulations, we pretty much have to approve it. But I will ask the developer about the lights. But they've got the private property rights on the property there, and I'll be affected as much as you, because I every morning turn left on 33 and then right on 32 coming out of River Creek Drive. So I'll be right there in the midst of that traffic, just like you will be.
Yeah, but my house is not right opposite it, and
I know.
I don't think it's good.
Mr. Chairman, forgive me for inserting myself, but understand, and for our citizens watching and our citizens that might be here, this is the classic example of where only the subdivision regulations are applicable. If it were not due to the size of Fairhope's extraterritorial jurisdiction, this body would not even be hearing this case. This would be strictly heard by the Baldwin County Planning Commission. So, and I know we heard lengthy discussions earlier in the meeting about many intricate details. Those are zoned properties, whereas this is unzoned in Baldwin County, so we can't apply the same standard to this development. We're strictly limited this body is limited to, from a regulatory standpoint, to what's within the subdivision regulations. So certainly the developer can take extra measures if they see fit, but we can't impose lighting restrictions, et cetera.
Right. Ma'am, you can, when Helen is through, you can come up and introduce yourself. You got to talk in the microphone. Are you done, Helen?
Yes,
All right, yes, ma'am. If you'll come up and please just state your name and your address for our record. You got to say your name and address, and you got to talk into the microphone so we can record it forever and ever.
Oh, I don't care. My name is Joe Owens, and I live directly across, kind of a little catty-cornered. I'm at the corner of Timony Lane and 33rd.
What's your address?
16772 River Park Road. And all I wanted to say is there's so much traffic on 33 at certain times of the day, especially in the mornings at school time and after work. And the road, there's no turn lane to turn off of 32 onto 33. And there's going to be a lot of people trying to get in and out. And if somebody's trying to turn in and, we can't get out going right, and they can't come coming from west, down from Fairhope. So I'd like, to consider that. Do you have anything to do with that? About putting a turn lane in there?
That would have to go to Baldwin County Highway Department.
Well, would you like to be a liaison?
Ma'am, we have to
You can't do it for me?
We have to be careful about jurisdiction and authority and that sort of
You
thing.
can go talk to the county. I mean, I understand what you're saying,
Are
but
you not the county?
we're the city.
You're what?
We're just the city. We just approved as the subdivision, meet the subdivision regs.
Oh, well, we're not in the city.
I understand. It's in the ETJ, extraterritorial
Well, that
jurisdiction.
does need to be considered too.
Right. And regardless of what Mr. Jeffries thinks, we're going to be in the city one day.
One day, I didn't say never.
It'll be before your grandkids, the time, I assure you. Thank you, ma'am. Is there anything, if you heard the comments, I know we do have lighting requirements in the subdivision ordinances, and, if y'all could be good neighbors and do whatever you can do with the lighting to have it down and not create light pollution, since you're on the front end, you can do it for the same price as tacking it up out there.
Did you close the public?
Oh, let me close the public hearing at this time, excuse me. Yes.
So yes, we will coordinate closely with the developer and ensure that the light stays in the subdivision and on the roads. And also, it's ultimately up to the homeowner and the builder whether they build fences.
Right.
Pass the concerns on to the developer
Sure.
and the builders about fences.
Right. We can't require that, but you heard what he said, but he can certainly build a fence, or y'all can, or whatever. I'd prefer to have greenery than a fence. I think the one man earlier mentioned he doesn't want to look at a fence, but thank you so much for being here. All right. Any questions for the developer or the staff? If not, I will entertain a motion. For S2, I'm sorry. The public hearing's closed, I'm sorry.
Make a motion, Mr. Chairman. I
Okay.
make a motion we approve the subdivision with the conditions recommended by staff.
I've got a motion to approve, subject to staff conditions. Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. All right, next item on the agenda is Gayfer and Bishop subdivision, SD 1926.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioners, this property was actually considered by this commission about 2 years ago on this same location at the intersection of Gayfer and Bishop. And the property owner at the time was either unable to or did not see the need to record the approved plat at the time. So it's back before this body for consideration again. We'll go through the basic information very, very quickly. You'll notice this property at the intersection of Gayfer and Bishop. This is a 3-lot minor subdivision. The lot sizes are noted on your screen. zoned R4, low-density multifamily. You'll see that the property owner developer, Mr. Taylor Wilkins III, and Mr. Larry Smith is the. Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. For some reason, the microphone was turned off. So, Commissioners, I went on at length there about the piece of property, but I'll just read it to you again very briefly. 3-lot minor subdivision, Gayfer and Bishop, R4 low-density multifamily. Mr. Wilkins, as you see on your screen, is the developer, and Mr. Larry Smith is the engineer of record. And as we mentioned earlier, this subdivision was considered by this body about 2 years ago, but it was not recorded. A copy of the plat on your screen. We can go back to this to answer questions. Infrastructure. This is a minor subdivision, not proposing installing infrastructure. We note in here, fire flow was conducted. Utility availability letters have been furnished. We make a note here for the developer's information about landscaping should this be developed in the future. We also note that, again, it's a minor subdivision not proposing development activities at this time. There's no existing sidewalks in this area. We advise the applicant that the Planning Commission may require a pedestrian easement for the installation of future sidewalks, and that would be at the option of the Planning Commission if they wish. We've noted drainage, not conducting development activities at this time. Drainage may be required by the building official at the time of actual development, and also the engineer of record gave us information stating that the trip generation of this subdivision will not trigger a traffic study. As said earlier, the staff recommendation is for approval of this subdivision. We have some photos of the site right here, but Commissioners, I need to fall back about infrastructure for just a moment, and I must apologize to Mr. Smith. I didn't have the opportunity to brief him about this before tonight's meeting, but looking at the site with Mr. Peterson, we noticed that because of the location of an existing gravity main and an existing force main for sewer services, it's possible that direct access is not available at this time for the center lot that you see there on your screen. So what we're going to verbally ask the Planning Commission is that, as a condition of approval, note on the plat that it's possible that an aid to construction fee may be necessary to provide sewer service to one, possibly two of the lots. And again, my apologies to the engineer for not warning him about that before the meeting. And Mr. Peterson, correct me if I misstated that.
No, and I'm looking at it, and there is a manhole adjacent to what would be Lot 1.
Yes, sir.
Lot 2 would be the lot that does not have anything, but I think that the manhole is deep enough to extend that line. We just need to make sure that Fairhope's not on the hook to provide it because we approved a subdivision as a minor subdivision. So if that note can be made on the plan, we're fine.
Yes, sir. And Chairman, Commissioners, we'd like to have that as
I can to make that.
Out of an abundance of caution, like to have that as a condition of approval, reflect that as a note on the plat. And Commissioners, Mr. Smith is with us here tonight if you have any questions of the engineer, and then I'm happy to answer any questions on behalf of staff. Thank you, Beaver. Any questions for staff? Anybody like to speak on behalf of the developer?
Larry Smith with SE Civil. I'm the engineer of record for the project, and no worries, Buford. We're fine with that. I'm looking at that to the plat. I'm here if you have any other questions. I hope it's pretty straightforward. It was approved previously. The reason it never got to the point of filing it previously was they were subdividing it because it had dual ownership, and then one of the owners just ended up buying out the other owner versus subdividing it. So that was the reason for that.
Now tell Taylor he forgot to record it, and if Taylor the first time was wasted with another recording, he'd have shot you, you know. The Sheriff Wilkins would have shot you for coming back again.
Well, he's had an excuse recently.
Yeah.
I'm messing with you. Any questions? I'll open the public hearing at this time. There is no public, but I'll close the public hearing.
There is, Mr. Dewberry's here.
Yeah, Mr. Dewberry, would you like to act like the public and tell them that it's going to increase traffic and lower property values and mess up runoff, or are you going to just sit there? All right, I'm going to close the public hearing at this time in that case. And commissioners?
Motion, Mr. Chairman, case SD 19.26, Gayfer and Bishop subdivision. I move we approve it, subject to staff recommendations, including the last one that Buford added to the staff recommendation. Y'all get that one?
He's not responsible.
Then it'd be added to the plan.
And could you mind including sidewalk easement? in that
And a
also?
sidewalk easement too.
'Cause there's, with the schools there, hopefully there'll be some sidewalks there at some point.
Yeah.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? You got the second, you put Rebecca or Richard? Perfect, all right. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. All right, moving right along, next item on the agenda, SD 1927. Mr. Dewberry finally get his chance.
This is a public hearing.
He keeps coming back for more, don't he?
TH Fairhope Falls, 2018 LLC for, thank you, I always forget that, thank you. For, let's see, a 34-lot subdivision. It's located on the south side of 104 and west of Fish River. The largest lot in the development in Phase 2 is approximately 19,902 square feet, and the smallest lot in Phase 2 is 15,000 square feet. This development is the second phase of the overall development known as Fairhope Falls. Phase 1 development has already been constructed and consists of 147 lots. This added a map in this, just so you could locate. It is actually on 3 parcels, this Phase 2. Oops, yeah. As you can see, it's actually on, I believe it's 3 lots. So that just kind of gives you a visual of the property. This is a final plat. We've had the final inspection. Most everything has been taken care of, so I was going to go over the conditions because some things have changed. On the final punch list, I do like to get the details of the supervisor sending me something to say everything is complete. I'm waiting on those. The request for waiver, there is really not a need for the waiver for the sanitary sewer video because they did submit that to us today, and we, Richard Peterson looked at that. There are some items that they need to take care of related to that sewer video, sanitary sewer video. So that condition would actually change, that they need to complete some items for that, regarding that sewer video. The surveyor needs to sign the plat. At the time, their surveyor was not there. And the final one is that we need a copy from Baldwin County stating something to the effect that they have completed their final inspection, that Baldwin County, because this is really out in the county, and that they are satisfied. So that covers it.
We can answer. Any questions for staff? Steve, anything you wish to add to that, or do you sit here the whole time just for that?
Before we come get a signature on the plat.
It looked good out there, I thought. Y'all did that one pretty quick, didn't you? Or am I just getting old and time passing faster? Seemed pretty quick. Commissioners, any questions? The developer has a representative here, staff. If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Oh, no, public hearing.
Oh. Anybody? Open public hearing? I closed the public hearing. Thank you. Thank you.
We're limited to the public now.
If one of us gets down and talks, we won't have a quorum anymore, so. But I did open and close the public hearing, Ken. You saw me do that. I'm legal now, so. All right, commissioners?
Make a motion to approve SD 19.27 along with staff recommendations.
I've got a motion and a second. Any further? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. All right.
Okay, thank you. All right, this is the verandas. It's a public hearing. To consider the request of the Verandas LLC for final plat approval for Verandas Phase 4, 32 lot subdivision. The largest lot in this phase is 23,561. The smallest lot is 14,817. Again, we have had the final inspection. Now, I will say that staff is making a request because we are having some issues with developers wanting to, and this has happened on multiple projects, but I do want to state that what is happening is they're feeling pressure to get things done, and so we're requesting that they now submit for the final inspection prior to the submittal for final plat, like a couple weeks ahead of time, so that we can get those conditions satisfied. This one still has not completed all the final inspection items. We've been out there, we've looked at it, we've got the list. So that's just something I wanted y'all to know that the planning department goes through. And so we're waiting on the completion of those items for final inspection. Again, this is one, they submitted the sanitary sewer video today. So we do have that, and there were some very minor comments on that, just some clean out type thing. Again, the surveyor needs to sign the plat. We need a copy from Baldwin County on the final inspection that they are satisfied. And they submitted, I was just on vacation, they submitted their subdivision bond package, but I have not had the time to get to it today. I was playing catch up. And I think that's it.
Thank you, Nancy. Steve, anything to add to that? I'll go ahead and open the public hearing at this time. And I'll go ahead and close the public hearing at this time. Commissioners, any questions? If not, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion, Mr. Chairman, case SD 19.28, recommend approval, subject staff recommendation.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second. Any further discussion? If not, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay.
Thank you.
Goodbye, Mr. Dewberry.
All right, talk fast.
You don't want to be our public?
All right, what we have next, that we have 4 different utility reviews all through AT&T. UR 19.15 is the only one that has a separate condition. We'll go over that real fast. The proposed area for this installation is 1,932 linear feet and approximately 900 feet overlashing of aerial fiber to existing copper cable within Fairhope's right-of-way. And the work is going to be done along Fairhope Avenue to North School Street, to Equity Avenue to North Bancroft, to Pine Street to North 2nd Street. Equality. The project will require the installation of 3 flush-grade handholds and 2 pedestals as indicated on the drawings. There's an aerial and a zoning map indicating the area of work that will be done. Our general comments for the construction of the work in the right-of-way is that all the right-of-way work will be followed in accordance to the right-of-way or ordinance. Excuse me. Recommendation is conditional upon is approval recommendation upon the following. The applicant shall follow the general comments related to the utility work as stated above. The applicant and applicant's contractor shall follow the right-of-way installation, permitting, and work procedures documented by the building official. And then the special condition is that there is a tree proposed to be trimmed on the south side of Fairhope Avenue, just west of Ace Hardware. And Paul Merchant, the city's horticulturist, shall be contacted to oversee the trimming of the tree. It is a larger 60-inch diameter tree, that just to make sure that it is not cut too far back or that it's done appropriately. Consulted with Paul Merchant, and he shall be contacted to supervise.
Is this overhead?
This area is the existing overlashing of the aerial limbs that are going there.
There's another really significant tree at Equality Street where it in school.
Where's
It's
going-
Maybe a 50, I mean, it's a heritage tree with a little marker on it.
And I believe that area is all underground,
Okay.
and it is underground installation there. So the appropriate right-of-way ordinance will apply there as far as the location of the underground compared to the tree and that root's there.
Okay, and you guys, when you have the comments about directional boring being used around significant trees, have people been complying with that? Do you have, is there oversight of that?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am.
The city has a new right-of-way inspector who is
Good.
staying on them.
Good.
We're cleaning up the right-of-way infractions that are occurring currently, partly with a lot of Mr. Peterson's comments on a lot of damage and the work that the city has been putting overtime in, extra hours, extra manpower into fixing some of these mistakes where some of these contractors and subcontractors were, trying to blow and go and get stuff in the ground, not always within their rights that they had. They have been, fines issued, aids construction for the work that has been done, and we're cashing it now more on the front end to make sure that any areas such as this tree that needs to be trimmed, or areas that you're talking about, or if there's just a conglomerate of underground infrastructure that is currently already there, we're looking more that in-depth besides just having the line locate go out and locate an area and saying, here it is. Richard and his staff are looking at it even further to make sure that different clearances and actually is there. A lot of times we're finding that there are, for example, sewer laterals that aren't marked, that they don't get marked, the mains get marked, and they'll put their boring machine down, start going, and from what I've been told, there are instances where they can tell if they've hit something soft and they shouldn't have and have continued to go. That's been made very clear to AT&T as well as AT&T's contractor, and to spread the word to their subcontractors that they are working, that kind of work is not going to be tolerated in the city of Fairhope, and those issues are and have been addressed.
Richard, if these things are put above ground, whenever the city gets to a project to put more additional sections of utilities underground, does the city have to pay to put AT&T's fiber optics underground at that point?
Well, I think what would happen is we'd move our electric, underground, and we would cut the pole off just above the top of the fiber or the communication cable and expect them to take over the pole and the maintenance until they find the opportunity to put it underground.
So they wouldn't use y'all's conduits, so why don't we just require them to go underground, tear it down?
Well, if we're going to pursue underground installations of electric, that needs to be part of the discussion. Because you're right, it won't eliminate overhead utilities if we don't do all of them. And I'm happy to do that, but, I would hope that they would pay their share of the installation cost of the conduit and everything it takes to reroute services, from overhead to underground. But certainly we would want to get it all done at one time. Our pole attachment agreements don't allow us to dictate they get off the pole if we abandon it. It becomes their pole.
So we just require them to go underground at this time then?
Now, the pole attachment agreement, I think, is pretty clear that if we abandon the pole, it's theirs. And they don't have to move their facility.
I understand that, but I'm saying if the city, then why do we allow them to attach to the city's pole?
I think there's some requirements that dictate.
Right now, the overhead that they're doing is they already have fiber and area line, copper line that is already attached on these poles. They're not going in, if they were going in brand new and wanted to go overhead, they would not be allowed to, even if there was existing utility lines above them, but they did not have their actual infrastructure attached to those poles. They are required to go underground and can't put any new infrastructure aerial, but they are allowed to overlash it to existing copper cable if they already have that on those poles, on the utility lines.
Now that, I didn't know that.
Yes, sir.
But that's good. Okay.
Yep.
All right. So is that the presentation for
That is for
1915 through 17.
that is for 1915. The other three
Okay.
do not have the same condition.
Okay, do I have a motion to approve 1915?
I move we approve.
Was that, wait a minute, was that a public hearing?
No.
No? Okay, thank you.
Be on top of it.
Okay, go ahead.
Everybody has to, I'm sorry. Yeah, excuse me.
We can start a call-in system. I move to approve 1915.
I've got a motion to approve 1915. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed say nay. Motion passes.
So the next three we'll do in succession with the recommendation at the end. They are the same standards, condition of approvals. For the first one for 1916, it's 115211 utility review for the installation of approximately 636 linear feet of fiber optic cable and an 1.5 inch HDPE conduit within the city of Fairhope's right-of-way. The installation will be a directional bore indicated on the drawings along South Summit to St. James to South Bayview. Not all the work is continuous. Some areas of the work are only under the roads. The project will require the installation of 6 flush-to-grade handholds as indicated on the drawings. There's an overview map of the aerial and of the zoning. If there's any questions on any of these, please stop me. Next, I'll move on to 1917. This is an 115211 review, utility review of the proposed underground installation of approximately 1,231 linear feet of copper communications cable and an 1.5 inch HDPE conduit within the city's right-of-ways. The installation will be a directional bore as indicated on the drawings along St. James to South Bayview Street. The project will require the installation of 4 flush-to-grade handholds and 2 pedestals as indicated on the drawings. Also, we were speaking of aerial lines. This project is also the removal of associated aerial facilities for the removal of Fairhope utility poles. So this is an area where Fairhope is getting rid of their aerial in there, and AT&T is taking theirs down and locating it underground to remove all aerial facilities in that area. And there's the map of the proposed work for that area. And again, it's not all continuous. Some of it are in spots just for underground, just for getting underneath some of the roadways. UR 1918 is 1152 review for the underground installation of approximately 630 feet of linear feet and 1.5 inch HDPE conduit within the city's right-of-way. The installation will be a directional bore where indicated on the drawings in Fox Hollow Phase 2 subdivision. The project will require the boring under the road in the new phase of Fox Hollow in various locations as indicated on the drawings. What they're doing is they're providing service for this new phase of development for Fox Hollow. So they're now going in and putting in all of their utilities that they need to provide Fox Hollow Phase 2 with their internet and phone service. And there's an overview, and that's just an outline. The zoning maps have not caught up with it yet, but that is the approved Fox Hollow Phase 2 subdivision. And for reference, there is a copy of the plat for you as well. So the comments, the proposed utility construction falls in the right-of-way of the city of Fairhope, and these are the general comments associated with it. The no open trenches will be allowed. Directional boring will be used in all sensitive areas, such as under roads and proximity to trees and on finished lots. The site will comply with all state, federal, and local requirements, including but not limited to the wetland ordinance, the red soil and clay ordinance, the Fairhope erosion control sediment ordinance. Staff recommends approval of UR 1916, 1917, and 1918, conditional upon the following: that the applicant shall follow the general comments related to the utility work as stated above, and the applicant and applicant's contractor shall follow the right-of-way installation permitting and work procedures document provided by the building official. I'd be happy to answer any questions on either three of those utility review cases there.
Any questions?
Motion.
I'll entertain a motion for UR 1916.
Approved, please.
Motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further? All in favor of approving 1916, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion passes unanimously. I'll accept a motion for 1917.
So moved.
Have a motion to approve. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. I'll entertain a motion for 1918.
So moved.
Have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any further? Robert and Peterson. All in favor to approve 1918, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion passed unanimously. Any old or new business?
I don't believe we have any old or new business this evening. Since we're talking about the utility reviews, just mention that Eric Cortinas is working on revamping the right-of-way procedures to help dictate some of the problems that we were having, to concrete some of those ideas and help in aiding the city's efforts to controlling some of that. So kind of tightening down and reinforcing some of the ideas that they may have forgotten or may have gotten laxed on, but he is revamping that ordinance completely. So he's working on a draft, working with staff members to try to come up with that, and that'll be before you eventually.
Excellent. Again, there would be no requirement against having somebody serve on the P and Z as well as the Board of Adjustments, would there?
I don't know the answer to that question off the top of my head.
The reason I was mentioning that, Buford, I was kind of thinking along the lines, tourism districts require Board of Adjustment approval, and overlay districts require Board of Adjustment approval, and then there are a few other caveats here and there that people go to the Board of Adjustments for approval. If Charles has not yet, he's going to submit his resignation due to, health and family issues. And, we might want to mention to the mayor that somebody off the Board of Adjustments might be a good addition here. If they're making decisions that have to do with planning and zoning, if they were at the planning and zoning meetings and did the continuing education that we do, et cetera, so that when stuff goes to them on Greeno Road or on a tourist overlay, that they know kind of, what the requirements are, rather than just looking at, normally, the Board of Adjustments just looks, is there a hardship, is there not a hardship? It has nothing to do with the development or how you want an area to develop. So, as we're putting more and more on the Board of Adjustments with, overlay, and now the tourist district, the overlay, the, M1 zoning, there are a lot of areas where we're trusting them to have the knowledge that the planning and zoning has, not just, is this a hardship? And I think the more we do that, it's kind of like we put a city council person on here, even if it was a rotation. It seems like it might make some sense.
That's an interesting and interesting but a good idea, and we'll certainly vet that at staff level.
Yeah, what you got to do is be able to thread the needle to find somebody that's willing to take on another high-paying extracurricular activity.
Yes, sir. Everything that we do at this level, both at the staff level and at the appointed official level, has its challenges. And as we heard today, that our regulations are both too stringent and too lenient.
Yes,
as we heard both today.
Well, you're going to have to fix that.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I'm
You'll
on
hear
it.
both from the same person.
Yes, sir. I'm
So
on it.
anyway, and whenever I give advice, it's just like George Costanza on Seinfeld: do the opposite, and you'll be perfect in life. So, anyway, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And second, all in favor, say aye.
Oh, me.